when I left office, the only thing still standing between this region and its unbelievable potential was a small group of rogue actors and violent thugs seeking constantly to drag the Middle East backward.
שתאפשר להם לצאת, אבל הבעיה היא...
You would think in this speech, considering what is taking place this morning, is that Donald Trump was talking about Israel, a group of violent thugs. He could have had fascists. He could have had, open air ghetto. He could have had apartheid state. He could have had killing spree, genocide, a sort of Holocaust, a final solution that is effectively taking place in Gaza right now. This headline didn't take place over several days. This headline that I displayed took place over the course of like a morning. It was only a few hours. And the 53,000 is nonsense. We're up to 100 to 200,000 people dead. Israel itself admits that 80% of them were civilians. I often say 2/3 are women and children. I say women and children, ignoring the fact that many of them are men that have nothing to do with the war, or for that matter, old people that have nothing to do with the war. They have effectively gone on a murder spree. For all of these people who say that there was a split between Trump and Netanyahu, Trump may not like Netanyahu. That may or may not be true. But as I kept pointing out, there was no split between Trump and Israel. That relationship was still a one-to-one. That relationship wasn't changing one iota. And for all of the, quote, goodwill that Hamas thought it was getting from the Trump administration, one of the Hamas representatives pointed out that that didn't happen. Their best hopes didn't happen. All things being equal, as you see right here, Witkoff is very clear. Witkoff, we're not stopping the war. We're not even pressuring them to do so. We're not planning to force Israel in the Gaza war, which means that all of this talk from Rubio or Trump about, the food, they need food, the humanitarian is nonsense. You've been had. You've been had. Witkoff also lied about something else. When Witkoff was talking to the hostage families, he said Netanyahu really has no, he's keeping the war going and he doesn't really have an objective. Witkoff is lying through his teeth. Witkoff, if he doesn't know, he should know, since Netanyahu clearly said what he was going to do. It's not like he's hiding the ball. He's been very clear that we have a final solution that we are going to implement on the Palestinian population right here. Don't take my word for it, take his. Listen to what he's saying here. It's very clear.
לא רוצה להגיד דברים, אנחנו בימים קרובים מאוד נכנסים בכל העוצמה להשלים את המהלך. להשלים את המהלך זה להכניע את החמאס. זה להשמיד את החמאס. אבל לא יהיה מצב שאנחנו נפסיק את המלחמה.
There will be no situation where we stop the war. There will be no situation where we stop the war. Let's keep going.
אומר, אתה יכול לעשות הפסקת אש בזמן ידוע, אבל אתה לא יכול. אנחנו הולכים עד...
A temporary ceasefire might happen, but we are going all the way. Okay, well, what does that mean?
אנחנו הקמנו מנהלת שתאפשר להם לצאת, אבל הבעיה אצלנו זה דבר אחד. אין לך, אתה צריך...
We've set up an administration that would allow them to leave, but we need countries willing to take them.
מדינות קולטות. זה אנחנו...
That's what we're working on right now. He means that's what the Trump administration is working on because Israel is a pariah state. Let's keep going.
לא רוצה להגיד דברים, אנחנו בימים קרובים מאוד.
Those people, effectively, in his mind, would not be allowed back. He is expelling the population of Gaza. He's taking over Gaza. And let's be very clear. The only reason he could say that is because the U.S. backs that. So for all of these breathless channels, breathless reporting, oh my God, there's a split between Trump and Israel. Oh my God, Trump and Israel are splitting up. Then how on earth is Netanyahu, who's getting 80%, if not more, of the money, bombs, bullets, in order to do that, doing that? Meaning, how is he committing this ethnic cleansing? How is he committing this genocide and continuing to do so if it wasn't with the will and express support of the U.S. government? And as Witkoff pointed out, we're not pressuring them to end the war. Okay, so there is no split. There is no divide. There is no line of separation between those two. Sure, Donald Trump is going to his quisling, pathetic governments in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, those governments that the United States effectively helped set up and maintain. Well, Britain helped set it up, but whatever. That the U.S. effectively helped to maintain and keep in power because it's easier to deal with a dictatorship or theocracy as opposed to dealing with a democracy, which is the reason why they destroyed the Iranian government in the first place, if you remember, when they overthrew the Iranian government, when Iranian government decided, hey, maybe we need to use the oil wealth, for the people of Iran. Well, that means Iran needs freedom, in which case they overthrew that government, putting in the Shah. The reason you have the government in Iran now is because they took their government back. I'm pointing out that these religious theocracies that Donald Trump is lauding as the bastion of Middle East peace and everything else are governments that Trump himself said that they would not exist if it wasn't for the United States. That's what I'm pointing out, that all things being equal, it would be impossible for Netanyahu to do what he's doing without the express support and consent of the U.S. government, that U.S. idea of there's this massive split between these groups. Nonsense. That narrative fell apart in fire and rivers of blood, with one murder after the next that's taking place in Gaza right now. Every building that they blow up, every person they murder is one more nail in the coffin of this nonsense narrative that there is some kind of breakup between Trump and Israeli government. There is not. I'm not even sure there's a split between Trump and Netanyahu, frankly. As I told you, I was very doubtful of it. I would bring people on and I would ask him, what is your take on it? And as Wilmer, Dr. Leon pointed out, whatever there may be between Trump and Netanyahu, who knows what that is? This is the truth. These children who are dying, these people being herded into a concentration camp, this is the truth of the matter. This is the reality of it. Don't believe what you're reading. Believe your quote unquote lying eyes, as the people often say. This is genocide. Call it what it is. because that's what it is. The mass slaughter and the mass murder of a large number of human beings, herding them into a concentration camp. That's what it is, and that is what is happening this morning. I want to go to my guest, though. I am joined with the man himself, Laith Marouf. Laith, perfect timing today. Just to give you a bio, Laith Marouf is an award-winning multimedia producer and media policy law consultant focused on issues of liberation and decolonialization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples and building broadcasting capabilities for misrepresented and underrepresented communities around the world. You can find him on FreePalestineTV. Welcome to the show, man. You doing okay today?
Yes, good to be with you, Jamal. Thanks for asking.
So this is a genocide. And, you know, I would tell you, when you lose Piers Morgan, oh my God, you've lost the argument. And this is not a boost to Piers Morgan. He has spent a year and a half denying the fact that this is a genocide, denying the murder and the slaughter of humanity of all of these human beings that are being herded and corralled into a concentration camp. But even he this morning is like, this looks bad. No shit, Sherlock. Give me your take on this. And one last point. There's been this narrative out that there's a split between Netanyahu and Trump, or Israel and the US. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is impossible without US support, correct? Meaning, when we're seeing all of these people being corralled, murdered, slaughtered, and sent to camps, they couldn't do this without US support, right?
Yeah, they definitely can't do this without US support. And remember, yesterday, the Israelis, or the day before, dropped 40 GBUs on the courtyard of the European hospital.
Yep.
And so this is the GBU delivery that Trump made a month ago to the Zionists. Now that they don't have any real military targets to hit with these GBUs, they are, as we are seeing right now, using them on tent cities, on courtyards of hospitals, on hospitals themselves, on schools, on homes, because that's the only targets they have. And this is, now broadcasted around the world. Look, I want to make sure everybody understands this. There is no return for Zionism from this moment that we have passed on October 7th. And the end of the Zionist colony is set in stone. There is no way there will exist a Zionist colony in the near future. We are already just in the countdown to its erasure from history, okay? And with it will come down 600, if not 900 years of a spree of genocide around this planet by European colonialist powers that are now all ruled from Washington, D.C. And so, while I am 100% sure of this, I'm also sure that the Zionist and the empire ruled from D.C. will continue to commit mass genocide against the Palestinians, the Arab people in general, as long as they can, okay? That doesn't mean they will succeed in the end, or they will exist at the end. But we have to be emotionally sure of understanding these things, so we don't lose sight either through this, mass genocide happening that is making some people desperate in their analysis, and or be like a fantastical, thinking that the Palestinians and the Arab resistance and the Muslim resistance somehow is going to defeat the empire easily, the most vicious empire in human history, at its most vicious moment, right? It was a huge mistake, I think, for some people at the beginnings of the Al-Aqsa flood and the solidarity fronts from the resistance, that they didn't analyze this correctly, thinking that either the Zionists are gonna stop the genocide somehow, or the West is gonna stop this somehow because of media pressure or public pressure in those regions, and or somehow that the resistance is capable of direct military defeat of the empire and its forces. That's illogical. This is a liberation movement, a decolonization movement. This is a rebel alliance of the wretched of the earth, fighting the most vicious empire in human history. They will succeed, but the price will be very high. And now that the Zionists in the colony itself and in the imperial domains have realized that there is no coming back from this. There's no way to re-win the public in the West, let alone in the rest of the world, that they've lost because of conducting this genocide so publicly, that they will just, because they realized it, become even more vicious. They are desperate. Even look at the propaganda that they're putting out. It's so disgusting. Even the Trump tour in the Gulf is even more humiliating for the whole history of talk about human rights and democracy and secularism and women's rights and gay rights. This is all being dumped in the garbage right now. Even more so with the tour of Trump, that it's supposed to look like it's a victory lap for the empire and the region.
Dig into that for me, because I have to be honest with you. I don't think there's a video of me predicting that they were going to win militarily, but I have to be honest with you. I am shocked. Guilty on some level, because my tax dollars are going to this, at the level of barbarity that is being displayed. If I would have never believed that they would have been able to murder 100, 200,000 people day after day after day for 2 years. This is not, as I keep telling people, this is different than a war against Ukraine. This is a war on a civilian population where 80% of the people being killed, according to Israel's numbers, are civilians, 2/3 of which are just women and children. And this is not, the cow hidden behind some fence. We're watching it day in and day out on social media. You can see it with your own eyes. You can hear the screams with your own eyes. You can see people putting their last thing saying, "I will probably die tomorrow," on social media. That is an alternate reality. You know what I mean? Like, from my conception of what I believe the world would accept. Here we are, though. Here we are. What do you mean that the Zionist colony has effectively, in doing this, there is no way back? Because I agree with you, there is no way back from this. But how does this destroy, dig into that for me, the Zionist occupation, settler colonial state of Israel?
There is no going back, because the whole, Zionist colony existence rested on two things in the Western powers and their populations. One is the guilt about the Holocaust, right? And that is all gone right now. It's gone. They've conducted a Holocaust. They are conducting a Holocaust. Those that are requesting compassion for the history 80 years ago of a Holocaust being conducted against the Jewish populations in Europe. So that's gone. The other thing is this idea that somehow the Zionist colonists are indigenous to this land, right? And that they are at the same time, simultaneously as being indigenous to this land, that they are the epitome of Western civilization, human rights, women's rights, ecology, culture, all of that, and the embodiment of this fantastical Judeo-Christian civilization, right? So this contradiction right now is, set bare for everybody. On the one hand, that everybody knows that they're not indigenous to this land. On the other, now everybody knows that there is no such thing as, civilization, period, in the West. There's only barbarity. And the conduction of both this genocide in Gaza, the mass destruction of Lebanon, the outright fascist takeover of Syria and conduction of genocide there in the name of Western civilization against the Christians, the Alawites, the Shias, and so forth. The mass death in Yemen, and destruction. So there's no way to bank on any of the propaganda that was built up for 80 somewhat years since the end of World War II in both the global consciousness. There's no way they can recapture that idea, nor within their own populations in the West that are now either choosing to become barbaric, as we see with the rise of the ultra-fascist, open fascist in Europe, in North America, in Australia, New Zealand, all of that. Those ultra-fascists that are saying we need to be proud of our colonial past. It's great to have Columbus, who mass raped and cannibalized the Arawak peoples of Hispaniola, what we call Cuba, right? That we need to re-glorify British colonial eras and imperialism, French, German, whatever it is, right? So this is what is now done. And finally, I would say one last thing, is that with this normalization of mass genocide of peoples in the greater Syria area specifically, in such open ways, right, is going to make the attacks by the resistance over the last 80 years, including October 7th, including the mass suicide bombings that happened during the Second Intifada, whatever is going to come next is going to make every kind of resistance before it look like child's play. It is now illegal on a global scale and normalized to bombard hospitals, churches, mosques, markets, tents of refugees, and so forth. It will be a normal response from the indigenous peoples that are suffering under these conditions to target similar targets in the West and inside the Zionist colony. We will see in the next months, as this continues, and it will continue, this genocide, that there will be such attacks happening, and there will be no one coming to cry when a synagogue is blown up in Paris and or in New York, or a Jewish school in Toronto is blown up, okay? I'm not telling you that this is what I want. I'm telling you that this is the normal course of how things are gonna happen. And the more isolated the indigenous people are in greater Syria, in Palestine, in Lebanon, in terms of their support by military power from outside, as now we see how Gaza is mainly left alone, save for the support of the Yemenis, how Lebanon is left alone to now fend for itself while the wild hyenas of ISIS are on the door and the wild hyenas of the Zionists are on the other door, then we should expect that this desperation and this, psychological reality that the West is forcing us into will lead to animalistic behavior in the same category as the animalistic behavior that the West has been conducting over the last 20 months.
I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and I pointed out, I said, look, Hamas is what Israel made them, right? Like, you can't treat people in a certain way and then expect those people to be loving-liked. They're responding in kind. When you see them make this argument that it was okay to kill 70 people and blow up an apartment building to get one guy, okay, that is the argument that you've made, right? That's the standard that you've set. And so if somebody blows up something, kills 50 Israelis to get one guy, okay, then you've set that argument when your actions. No, I understand what you're saying. It's not an advocation of this. It's not like, oh yeah, this is great. All of this is disgusting, but this is a standard that they're effectively setting with their behavior. And I want to bring in something else. You pointed out that Donald Trump is humiliating the U.S. and Western values, quote unquote, in Saudi Arabia. Look at this. He's shaking hands with this head chopper. This man has chopped the heads off Americans, by the way. And look at this. He's over there glad-handing him, anointing him, sitting there with one of the quisling governments that stood by as this genocide takes place on their doorstep. And to make this even more ludicrous, you get this statement from Trump on the airplane talking about Jelani, head chopper.
How did you find the Syrian president?
Right. I think very good. Young, attractive guy, tough guy. Strong pass.
Yeah, strong pass, chopping off heads with the hands that you effectively shaking his hand with. This is while they go out and murder en masse Alawites, Christians, the minorities communities, these fascist dogs that are in Syria right now doing this, as Donald Trump shakes his hand and says, look at the big buildings. You people are the picture of stability in the Middle East. Oh, those horrible people in Hamas, those horrible people in Iran. They just want to keep chaos going. Give me your take on that. That clip is so depraved that it is really hard to put into context with words on how depraved that clip is. Give me your take.
Yeah, so obviously our viewers that are American must understand that every American soldier killed by ISIS or Al-Qaeda in Syria, in Iraq, over the last 20 years, was sacrificed by the American leaders on purpose. Because the vast majority of attacks by ISIS and Al-Qaeda, we're talking about 99-point-something% of them, were all directed towards other Arabs in the region. Shia, Sunni, Christian, Alawite, Druze, Assyrian, whatever you want. They were the target. The real ones that fought the Americans in Iraq were what now we know as the Popular Mobilization Units and Hezbollah Iraq. Those are the ones that truly fought a military battle against the American occupation in Iraq and defeated it. Whatever actions we saw by ISIS or Al-Qaeda against the American presence in Syria and Iraq were directed and ordered by their handlers in the CIA and Mossad to give some legitimacy to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Remember, this guy, Al-Jolani, was the second in command of ISIS under al-Baghdadi. And he supposedly went to Iraq to fight American occupation. And today he's sitting with the American president, shaking hands, the same American president that's not only occupying Iraq, but also occupying the oil fields of Syria. So that should tell everyone that is watching clearly that these are not enemies. These are compatriots in the fascist scheme. Okay, and this man Al-Julani has provided the best service to the United States and imperialism and Zionism and Wahhabism that it can ever imagine. The United States has achieved the unachievable, taking down the two oldest capitals of the Arabic world and Muslim world, Damascus and Baghdad. After 100 years of attempts at occupying them, finally done at the hands of these butchers that we're told are Muslim and Arab, which it seems clearly they're not. So that's very important for everybody to understand that is American and watching. Now, why would this be a humiliation? Because the United States has played for the last 30 somewhat years this game of pretending that these Wahhabi death squads are not its tools. It had to play that propaganda in order to fool not only its own populations, but the populations in the Arabic and Muslim world who may have, some of them, fell to the idea that, yeah, Al-Qaeda is anti-American, I'm gonna cheer for them. ISIS is anti-American, I'm gonna cheer for them. I'm not gonna cheer for a Hezbollah because they're Shia. You see? Now, the cards have all been laid bare. Okay? Everybody who lied to themselves and to the public over the last 15 years, for instance, about the war in Syria, now cannot lie anymore. They have to cheer for ISIS and Al-Qaeda openly. They have to cheer for American occupation of Syria and its resources openly in order to maintain their line. It makes things clearer for everybody. Similarly, what just happened with the Saudis and Qataris and Emiratis being milked like a cow openly. Again, this is a moment where the United States is not leaving a path to return back from what it just did, to sign the largest deal, weapons deal in its history to the Saudis, or to sign the biggest deal of Boeing jets in its history to Qatar. Who the hell wants to fly? Qatar doesn't need these many jets, okay, for its airline. It doesn't fly, to every place in the world.
It's a tiny country. It's a tiny, tiny country. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So they're being shaken down, and especially with Boeing, for instance, as it's almost at the edge of bankruptcy. Not even American Airlines want to buy its jets. European companies are buying Airbus. The rest of the world is starting to buy Chinese, Russian, and Iranian, commercial jets, and including Brazilian. So the market is dying. These guys are being shaken down to take the stock that is stuck on the tarmac that nobody wants to buy by force. And yes, so this is all, actually the United States continuing to go down the cliff, and it can't pull itself out of it.
That is a stunning moment. That handshake and him effectively saying tough history when the history of Julani is well known. Oh, that is a mind-blowing moment. And the media, of course, in the United States, yada, yada, past this. Like, meaning the media in the US ignores the fact that the guy's a terrorist, ignores the fact that the guy was killing Americans, ignored the fact that the guy was chopping off heads, ignores it completely. Trump shakes his hand. He's the new president of Syria. He's been anointed. That's all there is. 2 minutes of memory, and they move on like nothing is taking place. And you have them congratulating Donald Trump for Middle East peace talks. And with the bonus of he's shunning Israel, so he didn't stop at Israel. Isn't that amazing? Like, all of this stuff is just propaganda that's put into the air and put into the water that people drink and consume. It's like, oh, Trump is shaking hands with the president of Syria. Oh, that's great. Oh, Trump is making deals with the Middle East. Wow, he's gotten all of this investment. This is amazing. Wow, he's shunning Israel. He doesn't like Israel. He didn't even stop at Israel. when the reality of it is, A, they're committing a genocide with the U.S. approval and consent. B, that guy is a monster, is an animal that was literally chopping off his hands, is covered in blood, and yet he's been anointed by Trump. And I think the truth of the matter is, it's almost like this is the culmination of 20 years of work to overthrow and destroy the Syrian government, with that handshake being, hey, we're going to lift sanctions. We're now going to give you the support that you need. We're going to make Syria into whatever image that we want Syria to make. That's what that handshake meant. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong in this.
Yes, and I would like to note that Syria was the first country in after World War II, not only to exit through armed revolution, colonial occupation of the British and the French, and that's something probably also people don't understand, that during World War II, the British occupied Syria and Lebanon from the Vichy regime of France. And actually, in the end, Syria fought the British to get its independence in 1942. But to get back to this point, Syria was the first country to also suffer an attempted CIA coup before the CIA was called a CIA. So it's the first country that the United States attempted to intervene in to do regime change, even before the attempted or the coup in Iran against Mossadegh in 1956. So in 1942, before there was such a thing called the CIA, the nucleus of the CIA attempted a coup in Syria, and that was followed by 7 coups, between 1942 and finally the coming of Hafez al-Assad, in 1970, somewhat, that there was 7 coups organized by the CIA, the French intelligence, the British intelligence, and so Syria has always been one of the primary targets of imperialist machinations. Now, in terms of this supposed, kerfuffle or fallout between Netanyahu and Trump, this is all theatrics. Why? On the one hand, the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Qataris that are being shaken down need to look like their money is buying them something. So its number one target of this propaganda is the Arabic public in those countries, that you look, your Arab leaders can actually have influence with the emperor. They can buy American politicians like the Zionists. You see, we can play the game. Arabs don't need to be a revolutionary. They just have to copy the Zionists, I have my cat here. I'm just going to push her out because she decided that she...
You're perfectly fine. It's like the cat gets involved. Just as we were pointing out, the OSS, Office of Special Services, before the CIA. Yeah.
Yes. So that's the thing. The other thing is, look, the money of the Saudis and Qataris and Emiratis is already under the disposal of the Americans. Every day, the money of the Arab Gulf oil and gas is being looted. It's all put in American and British banks, all of it. And so it's not like the American presidents are not looting this money every year. They are. They just are now doing a presentation of it because Trump needed to look like he's getting something extra. Not $1 that the Qataris or Emiratis or Saudis have, they can spend as they wish. For the most part, the Arabic, oil and gas has been the savior of Western economies for the last 60 years, at least. There's all this black money that has been dumped into one president calls Saudi, says, hey, I'm moving some of this money to build some bridges here, do this, that here. And of course, the last time they built bridges in the United States is, I don't know when. But so this is all theatrics. These are house slaves. They're kept in power with drugs and prostitution and an army of Western soldiers and mercenaries around them to protect them. That's the whole reality of the Gulf monarchs, and they're allowed to spend enough to make them look like they're in a better situation. In most of the Gulf countries, they're giving direct salaries to the populations, inflating their realities, except in Saudi Arabia. By the way, there's mass poverty in Saudi. If people don't know this, there's millions of homeless people in Saudi Arabia, not hundreds of thousands, millions. And this is actually why Saudi is the weakest point of all of this Gulf system that the Americans and the British built, because it's actually a big population, 30-some-odd million. So the percentage of the money being looted by the West is too high for such a high population number. But in Qatar, when it's a couple 100,000 citizens, no matter how much you loot of the money as the West, you still have enough trickle down to the population.
So you make a really good point that the only reason that and by the way, Trump made that exact same point, saying that the only reason these governments are in power is because the U.S. allows them to be in power and offers them protection. And if it wasn't for the U.S., that they would effectively collapse. I think he said this within the first time he was in office. Now, they're the pillar of stability. They're the greatest thing. And these other thugs and whatever he was going after is the thing that's effectively destroying the Middle East. What happens to Syria from here? I mean, Donald Trump removed the sanctions. You had Syrians celebrating in the streets. And I would imagine they would celebrate, right? Sanctions are an act of war. They were damaging, destroying the country for years for the sole purpose of doing what they just accomplished. But Jelani is effectively selling off Syria to Trump. So American companies are going to come in, more likely than not. There's talk about balkanizing it. It's already been balkanized. Israel has taken part of it. Turkey has taken part of it. What happens from here on out going forward?
Well, Syria is not an easy bite to swallow. Not for the Americans and not for any empire that preceded them. There's too much historical record in the Syrian people over those 12,000 years since the building of Damascus and Aleppo, the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, to just shake it off so easily. And look, although I am anti-Jolani, anti-ISIS, anti-Al-Qaeda, I would never wish for the sanctions to continue in Syria. These are my people. I saw the results of these sanctions that are war crimes and crimes against humanity that are meant to bring people to their knees in order to facilitate the regime change. And I believe that the minute there is a better living condition for the Syrians, that is when we will begin to see a more sustained resistance to the Jolani presence and the American occupation. People are right now starving, kind of almost. So it's hard for them to resist after 15 years of this sanction regime. So I want them to have a respite so they can begin resisting. I don't know how this will develop, but we're already seeing, of course, armed resistance in the coast, armed resistance in the south. And the minute we see beginnings of armed resistance in the two major cities, Aleppo and Damascus, that over 2/3 of the population of Syria are in, that's when things will get serious. There is no way for these Wahhabi death squads, especially all their foreign fighters, to continue occupying these cities, and that there will be no physical reaction. Okay. The elite, financial and political and religious elite in those two cities will not allow themselves to be ruled by Uyghurs and Turkmens and Chechens and Mossad agents, that are probably, like Jolani is probably Israeli, Arabized, like before him al-Baghdadi and before him Cohen in the 1970s. So this is a given to me. How it will come, when it will come, I don't know. I can't predict that. And I think one thing that we can maybe time those situations is about how stable Lebanon is. If Lebanon explodes into a full war with a new invasion by the Israelis, which is very probable, then I think that will accelerate whatever resistance being born in Syria, because it will just spill very fast. It's not going to be that the Israelis enter Lebanon and somehow there will be no mass migration into Syria, opposite migration, which will bring with it the resistance into Syria. If they try to close the borders on Lebanese as they're trying to slaughter Lebanon, I think we will see a direct fight. Look, the Zionists and the Americans behind them, because they are constantly choosing the maximalist position in their warfare, this is also laying out maximalist trajectory of reactions and actions by the resistance, whether they want it or not. And this is, kind of the same when we started here talking about the kind of warfare that is now normalized by the imperialists, how it will normalize a similar kind of warfare by the resistance. Similarly, a maximalist, zero-sum game being enforced on the ground in Lebanon will lead to a maximalist positionality in the whole region.
But what they're hoping is that with the sanctions removed, the economy gets going to some degree. And with an economy getting going, that the public will be okay with the new government, effectively saying, hey, this new government is now ensuring that you're getting higher wages and that you're getting more money and that more items are coming into the country. Aren't you happy with this new fascist, government? I mean, granted, this argument is kind of difficult to make, right? Because you've taken a country that was multicultural for decades and overnight turned it into this kind of fascist theocracy regime, which, if that was America, I don't know how we would accept that. If overnight, all of a sudden, everybody in this country is Christian, everybody must go to church, everybody must worship this one God, everybody must, porn is gone, gambling is gone, all of these things that you've become accustomed to in America are gone, no cigarettes, you can't play chess like they do in Afghanistan. I don't know how we would accept that, but that's effectively what we're cheering in Syria. And so would a better economy be okay, make that okay? I don't think it would, but you would know it better than I would.
Yeah, so look at the contradiction of what they're trying to do economically. Okay, on the one hand, they lifted these sanctions. On the other, as you said, they are selling out everything in Syria, which means there will be no jobs. Okay, if there's no factories running because the market is flooded by purposefully, at cost prices of Turkish products, where's the jobs? If all the police and military is filled by Wahhabi death squads from around the world, where's the jobs? If all the women are banned from the medical field and the judicial system, where are the jobs? So they will be if all the oil fields, and by the way, there's cobalt in Syria, that Syria was not part of the war on Syria, was to stop Syria from pulling the cobalt and or the gas and oil that is in the Mediterranean, which are the biggest oil and gas fields in the whole Eastern Mediterranean. Syria has more oil and gas across its coast than Turkey, Greece, Cyprus, Israel, Egypt, okay? It will be, and they will not be allowed to, they weren't allowed even by the Russians, and this is part of the problem. The Russians didn't allow the Syrians to pull out that gas and oil from the Mediterranean. But imagine if none of those give you jobs, and all the gas and oil and cobalt and cement and wheat and cotton of Syria is just being exported by the loot of the Wahhabi death squads and the Turks and the Americans and the Israelis. What money is going to be in the market, right? So there's going to be a limit to how much, betterment of life conditions the average Syrian will see because of how the Jolani and behind him, the Americans and the Israelis are reformulating the state.
Laith, fantastic breakdown. Really, honestly, you are one of the best analysts on the subject matter. You've been right in your take on this stuff, and we will see how it unfolds. I really appreciate you joining me. Just so the audience, to give the bio, Laith Marouf. He is an award-winning multimedia producer and media policy law consultant focused on issues of liberation and decolonization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples and building broadcasting capabilities for misrepresented and underrepresented communities in the world. You can check him out at FreePalestineTV. Laith, where else can people find you, by the way?
Yes, the website is freepalestine.video. We're doing almost daily reports from
that was TV.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so from South Lebanon and Palestine, and we're on X at TV Free Palestine, on YouTube and many other platforms. You can find all the links to our social media on our website, freepalestine.video. We just did a report from South Lebanon around the Hula Valley. We were following Israeli drones trying to conduct warfare, and we found ourselves multiple times being the only journalists on the scene.
Oh, Laith, please be careful. They are murdering journalists left and right.
Yes, and yesterday they were firing on journalists, sniper fire from an illegal Israeli occupation base just beside the UNIFIL base in the Hula Valley, just beside them, and the UNIFIL were just letting them shoot at the journalist.
When they bombed that hospital, part of the rationale that people believe is to kill the journalist that was in that hospital. And, he had written, I think it was like an article or something where he was being interviewed. And he said, they could kill me here. There's nothing to stop them from doing it. And damned if they didn't do it.
Yes, they had tried assassinating him before, and he was, crippled. He was amputated because of that attempt. And when he was in the hospital, he said that he believes that Israelis will try to assassinate him inside the hospital. And that's what they did. They flew a drone into the hospital, into his room, hitting him on his bed. And, to go back to this normalization, if it's normal to hunt journalists in their hospital beds in Palestine and or here in Lebanon, wouldn't it be normal then to go after the CEO of the BBC or PBS or CNN or journalists on the ground here, like whoever they are? Aren't they legitimate targets from BBC and world news agencies that are propagating, support for genocide? This is, I think, where, everybody that's watching has to understand what kind of world we live in now and who's allowing this kind of world to be. And, this is the future, not only the reality now, but this is how it's going to be for as long as the Western Empire, the Zionist Empire, it can do whatever it wants to in such ways.
See, in their minds, though, they think propaganda is enough to deter that. Like, it's like Hunger Games, right? This was described yesterday as Hunger Games, where they would do something and they would say, hey, it is okay to kill 70 people, innocent civilians, in order to get one. But if you do it, oh, that's outrageous. They can't, they're barbaric, they're terrorists, they're et cetera, et cetera. But it's okay when they do it. I mean, I'm not going to keep you, I'm sorry. We watched the leaks where they were talking about bombing a house to get one person. And it's like, okay, so that is your standard. So how are you calling these other people terrorists when they do this something similar that you are doing? In fact, you're doing it even more so. It's just, I agree with you. I guess that's my point. You have a fantastic day, man. Please be safe.
All right.
You are another award winner. You deserve it. You are putting your body out on the line for it.
Thank
God
you.
bless you, man. Be safe.
Talk to you soon.
Have a good one. All right. I would like to bring in my next guest, a fan favorite and a favorite of mine, one of my best people to talk to, Dimitri Lascaris. He is a lawyer, journalist, activist, Montreal, Quebec. In 2020, he ran for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada. Dimitri, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
As well as one can do under the circumstances, brother. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, that's what Laith and I were talking about. They have opened up. If anybody thought this was a genocide or wasn't a genocide, I don't know how they make this argument now. They're effectively, after starving people for over a year, and I know people started focusing on it after a month, but this has been going on for over a year. I mean, even under the Biden administration, where Biden was like, I made a deal with Netanyahu, and if he doesn't give XYZ in X number of months, then I'm going to do so and so. He'll be back. He'll be back. There you are. Yeah, after even the Biden administration, and even under that administration, they were saying they wanted 300 trucks. They were only getting 30. And which means that even back then, they were in a policy of starvation. If you remember, the Biden administration forced his underlings to change a report that pointed out that Israel was starving the population. Those people quit in protest because the Biden administration was effectively changing the report. And so this is not, oh my God, they've been starving them for 2 months. This has been going on for over a year. And now, in addition to the starvation, it's forced movement, forced marches to a concentration camp after blowing up building after building, after blowing up hospitals. Yeah, I have never seen.
It's actually been going on. It's been going on for more than a decade. Before October 7th, UNRWA and other experts in humanitarian aid documented that the Israelis had, as they like to put it in their consummately depraved manner, they'd put the civilian population on a diet. And there was widespread malnutrition before October 7th, 2023. And in addition to insufficient supplies of food, the water was largely contaminated. There were insufficient supplies of fresh water, and there were also regular blackouts. So there were insufficient supplies of electricity. And what happened on October 7th was Israel escalated. And as has been the case throughout Israel's history, there were never any consequences. Israel always, it has this devious expertise in pushing the envelope. So it pushes the envelope, it sees if there's consequences, no consequences, it pushes further. And so now it has taken it to the next level. It dropped the, as you mentioned, it wasn't 300 trucks. It was actually the pre-war humanitarian aid, daily aid amounted to 500 trucks. And that was inadequate to maintain the health of the population. So then they said,
real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just pointing out that Biden wanted 300 in his own document of his agreement. Yeah, I'm sorry, please.
Which would have amounted to slow starvation of the population. So Israel has now escalated that it didn't go to that 300, it was much less. So it was starving the population to an even greater degree than before October 7th, and now it has escalated again under Donald Trump. And I believe it would have done that whether or not Biden or Kamala Harris had won the election. They would have seen there were no consequences for limiting the aid to 30 trucks a day, which was grotesquely inadequate. And then they would have said, okay, so let's just cut it off altogether. So no one's going to do anything about it. And so this is where we are now. It's just outright rapid starvation of the population.
Has this surprised you? I'm curious. I have a Western point of view because I live in the West, meaning I may say I'm a man on the moon looking at events, and my value set is set by family and those type of things. All it's true. But I realized that on big events that happen in a global scale, my point of view is not exactly right. And I'm going to say this in two fronts. On the first front, when Russia went into Ukraine, every American at the radio station didn't think it was going to happen. And Russia went in because from their point of view, for one, we're under siege. NATO is expanding to our border. We've been invaded multiple times. In the last war, we lost 30 million people. In the war before that, we lost 10 million. So yeah, we're dodgy about our borders and we're serious about it in a way that us as Americans who haven't been invaded, well, I mean, the Brits, but that was, God knows what, it's 1812 or something, who have neighbors like Canada and Mexico who are not going to invade us. And we live across oceans that give us protection. So again, our point of view was shaped by that, missing the actual point of view of the Russians. In that case, I've reorganized my point of view to be more appropriate. On this one also, though, I would have never believed that it would have been allowed to slaughter, murder, to commit an outright genocide in front of the eyes of the world community, day in and day out, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of people, with them openly advocating. This isn't hidden. This is not like, you have to read the Nazi documents to read it. This is them advocating a position of, we're going to starve 2 million people in order to force capitulation in a mass punishment campaign. I could not conceive that. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
Did you think that this would be okay and allowed by quote unquote Western civilization?
Yeah, that's the question. I'm not surprised that Israel, that its leadership and the majority of its population wanted to exterminate the Palestinians, wanted to drive them out of historic Palestine. I think that they, in various ways, have expressed that desire for a long time. But I never imagined, Jamarl, out of my wildest dreams, that Western governments and international institutions would allow this to go this far. I'm astonished. I wake up every day in a state of disbelief. And it takes a good, 30 to 45 minutes to me just to remind myself that this actually is happening 19 months after the genocidal rampage began. Now, I see some indications that finally, 19 months into this horror show, the tide is turning. So, for example, there was an editorial, quite surprising, in the Financial Times, denouncing the shameful silence about what Israel is doing to Gaza. And apparently the Independent, another pro-Israel corporate media outlet in the United Kingdom, has also published an editorial. I haven't seen it, but I hear that Piers Morgan is starting to, express horror at what Israel is doing. And I just listened this morning to a Sky News interview of an Israeli diplomat, Sky News, where they were excoriating Israel for what is the starvation of the civilian population, and weren't buying for 1 second. But the immediate, and reflexive response of this genocidaire was, well, it's all the fault of Hamas. And the Sky News reporter just categorically rejected that. So, and now you're also seeing Netherlands calling for the review of economic cooperation agreements between the EU and Israel. Macron, although I don't trust him at all, echoed this, saying, if this doesn't stop, we're going to have to review those economic cooperation agreements. it's still shocking beyond belief that it has taken this long just to get to that point. But there are indications that the tide is turning, and I think that really what is probably doing the job here is just these images of emaciated. I think you and I might have had a conversation about this before. In some interview recently, before these images began to appear, speculating that if people start seeing in the West, skeletal children, ghost-like skeletal children begging for food en masse in Gaza, I don't think a lot of people are going to see more. And the government's going to be confronted, and the Western governments are going to be confronted by a potential social explosion. And I think they have reached that point.
Yeah, at this point, I disagree. I don't think people care. I mean, this is one of those things where I am refocusing my workable point of view. Sky News ran an article saying kids die of malnutrition. Okay, well, they died of starvation, intentional starvation by the state of Israel. Call it what it is. If you can't even call it what it is, right, then I'm doubting the sincerity of the people who are running those stories. This is nearly 2 years after starvation, murder. We watched a rape, a literal rape, where Israel gang raped a prison inmate. And the government, or I think it was like Channel 4 or Channel 14, whatever the hell news, ran a poll saying, is this okay? Think about that. They're running a poll saying, is it okay to gang rape a Palestinian inmate? And the majority of the population said, yes, it is okay to do that. They went in order to rescue the people who they put in prison for that gang rape in order to release those people. We watched that. Like, that wasn't hidden. And so 2/3 of the people that have been slaughtered have been women and children. Okay, so if I know that Israel itself admits that 80% were civilians, if we've watched them use human shields, that's something been reported, then why would I believe that emaciated kids would be the difference? I hope that makes sense. And I'm sorry for them doing construction. Man, when I give my review, that review is going to be brutal. I'm sorry. I guess my point is, do you really believe that after everything that we've seen day in, day out in our social media, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, that is going to be the thing that makes the difference at this point? He will be back. He will be back. He will be back. Oh, there we are. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm in a place in Greece where my internet connection isn't too strong. I think I heard most of what you said, Jamarl, and I want to place the emphasis on the word may. I said we may be seeing, a turning of the tide. I share your skepticism. I really do. So I see signs which may at the end of the day amount to nothing. And the level of complacency in the population may continue to be so elevated that nothing is done to put an end to this horror. So I readily acknowledge that. I'm not at all convinced that we've reached the tipping point, but I think that there are some indications that we might be there. And let us, hope. All people of conscience I know out there are praying and hoping that is the time has come.
People of conscience? What people of conscience?
Well, I would like to think that you and I are people of conscience. After all, we're sitting here bemoaning what's being done to the Palestinians.
No, I get that, but I get the sense that maybe I'm too cynical now. I have never seen anything like this.
Neither have I.
It's one thing. No, please.
No, I as I said, I'm in a state of. I still am in a state of disbelief. I can't believe it. And my anger, I have to tell you, and I think you might agree with me about this. My anger is not simply, my indignation is not simply directed at governments and institutions. I see people walking around me all over, the societies in which I live and move and work, going about their daily business like nothing has changed. In Canada, we just had an election. I can't tell you, Jamarl, how much this disgusts me.
Yeah.
I'm beside myself. I'm so ashamed to be a Canadian. We just had an election in which 85% of Canadians voted for either the liberals or the conservatives, both of which are completely committed in every conceivable respect to Israel and its genocidal project. And the only difference between them is really rhetorical. There's one of them, the one substantive difference is the liberals are willing to continue funding UNRWA. But at the end of the day, what does that matter when the Israelis are being allowed to destroy UNRWA and kill UNRWA workers and block UNRWA way? So even that's not really a meaningful distinction. But other than that, it's purely rhetorical. They're both totally pro-genocide. And this figure I mentioned, 85% of Canadians voting for these parties, is much higher than the amount of the percentage of the votes that they received collectively in, I think, any other election in my lifetime. It's like people were gravitating towards the two genocidal parties to a greater degree than in prior elections. I'm astonished at this. I can't believe that people are voting for these criminals. They're criminals. They're aiding and abetting a genocide, for God's sakes.
Same thing here. I mean, and to make it even worse, the Democrats, for one, they were funding the genocide. And then you had liberals who were acting like they were in a cult, who couldn't even mention the word Palestine, wouldn't let the Palestinian on stage. And this is, by the way, with the majority of Democrats, meaning who are just party regulars, being against it. And meaning it is very possible that 8 million people didn't show up to vote because of the issue of Israel and that they were committing a genocide. So I guess God bless them for that. But the majority of the 50 million people, how many ever million people went and vote, they did so knowing full well that Joe Biden was effectively backing that genocide. So now my outrage is just over the top over all of this. I agree with you. As a lawyer, and I look at the United Nations and I think to myself, what is the point of the United Nations? I don't understand the point of it. And I know it's supposed to be global stability and all of this other stuff. All of these things are just words. When they're watching something like this and they seem to be powerless to do anything about it. And I understand the UN Security Council has a role, but isn't there a mechanism by which the United Nations itself, the General Assembly, has the power to compel action on something that's an atrocity?
No, it's resolutions. The United Nations was designed to fail. It was designed to empower the victors in the Second World War to impede irrevocably any action which they felt were contrary to their own interests. So they gave a veto power to the victors. And they've retained that veto power ever since, even though, Britain and France are basically economic and military Lilliputians today. Not that they were much of anything at the end of the Second World War, but they're laughably insignificant. Why should they have a veto power? Why should anybody have a veto power? I personally believe if you want to have an effective international legal regime that is enforced in an impartial and just manner, then the General Assembly should have its resolution should have the force of law, and the institutions of the United Nations should be obliged to implement those resolutions, and there should be some system of weighted voting in the General Assembly. You shouldn't have the Marshall Islands having the same weighted vote as China. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
The Marshall Islands has 50,000 people, so that's absurd. So there should be some system of weighted voting, and the General Assembly should have the final say, and its resolution should be binding. But that's not the system. And so now it's become the use of the veto power and the inherent flaws of the structure of the United Nations have completely discredited the institution. I think you basically just scrap the whole damn thing and start over again. It's now completely and utterly discredited, as is the International Criminal Court, as is the International Court of Justice. The post-World War II legal architecture lies in smoking ruins.
I guess, what is it, to the victor go the spoils? That's kind of the way they set it up. And anytime you have a superpower, they're not going to allow any kind of overarching thing over top of them. So the US, Russia, China, none of these countries are going to allow some foreign body to affect what happens. And then you get a superpower that effectively gives license to another country to do what they want. And the only way to stop that country from doing what it wants is a war, which nobody wants. It's like the mechanics writes itself. I mean, I suppose you can use economic power, but the governments of Europe are terrified. Look at what the US is doing with the tariff war. They come out, decide 4% of the globe, tariff war against the entire world. And you get China, but China has effectively worked with other countries in order to build a coalition to do anything about it. Like, they don't want to get involved. It's that. Like, they don't want to expend and risk anything to get involved as countries when something like this is taking place, which is, I guess, the core of the problem. I mean, is the core of the problem that we have superpowers at all? And I mean, maybe at some point the world says, okay, no more for something like that. I don't know how the world would do that. I don't know what that looks like. Yeah, I don't know. This world just doesn't work. Like when you see
the core of the problem, in my view, Jamarl, is that we keep empowering psychopaths. That's what we're doing. You know, I used to defend the voting public before this genocide began.
Mhm.
And I used to hear all the time people say things like, and I heard this from people on the left, you know, who shouldn't be saying this kind of thing. If voters are stupid, you can't rely upon voters. Now, I don't go to that point. I don't say voters are stupid. I actually think voters have a lot of common sense. And if they inform themselves and if they act in accordance with their conscience, usually they will make the right decision. But I would say, after having witnessed this monstrosity, this unending monstrosity day after day, that the majority of the people in our societies do not inform themselves and do not act in accordance with their conscience. And as a result, they keep empowering people who are depraved, buffoonish, incompetent psychopaths. And that's why we are where we are. And
but I don't know how you avoid that. Like,
don't,
the moment
well,
it
let's look at the U.S. election. Okay, how do you avoid that? You should have voted Jill Stein, if you ask me, or you could have voted for Cornel West. Okay, now are these perfect candidates? Do they have the right experience and so forth? I don't know if they're. I wouldn't say they're perfect, but would they have been far better presidents, Cornel West and Jill Stein, than these two lunatics, Kamala
No.
Harris and yeah, absolutely, by a country mile. And yet almost nobody voted for them.
Because, so there's a concept I call esoteric other. And I call it that because when people go and vote, oftentimes they think to themselves, what is the other person going to do? Meaning, what is this mythical other person that I have in my mind going to do? And I may vote for Jill Stein, but is anybody else going to vote for Jill Stein? It's a systemic issue. It's a mechanical issue. It's almost like you need to somehow create a system that would allow, like, ranked choice voting, for example. Like, I'm not penalized for my voting choice. So if I vote for this person and this person loses because this person was a long shot, that I'm not penalized by being my only vote for that person. Because I think a lot of these, look, I'm a software engineer by trade. So think of this so mechanically. And I think human nature is what it is. If you put people in a position where it's like, okay, you can vote for this long shot who most likely not going to win. So from their point of view, you're wasting your vote, or it's a protest vote, or you can vote for these other two lunatics. Then you're going to get the majority of the people voting for these two lunatics. And I would tell you, from the standpoint of the Black vote, oh man, we have been corralled. Like, the Black vote in the United States effectively is who keeps the monsters at bay. And the monsters from the Black vote standpoint is the Republican Party, because that's the white party as we define it. And the white party is a party that's going to go after you and yours. And so going all the way back for, God, like 50 years, the Democrats have been able to effectively corral the Black vote with, hey, look at us put this Black person in this position who's not going to do anything for you. But hey, there's a token, there's a shiny object. That is historic. And that is based upon domestic politics, not international. I don't know how to fix that. I don't even know how to get around that.
I think you're absolutely right in terms of your analysis of what people, the reasoning process that people go through. You know, for example, members of the African American community, when they think about the prospect of a Trump victory. But I think the reasoning is flawed. And I think our experience has shown that. I think people who are looking at the situation realize that if you always vote for the lesser of two evils, you will always be governed by an evil. You'll be
Yes.
governed by an evil person. And because the Democrats have never been truly punished for betraying their core constituencies, including particularly the African American community, they just become contemptuous of them. And
Yes.
they betrayed their promises. Even when you have a black president,
Yes.
he basically shit all over, the African American community during his 8
Yep.
years in office. So at this stage, people who are just, if they're thinking rationally, should not be buying into the logic that you just laid out, which is, I think, exactly what is driving a lot of this behavior. It's flawed reasoning, and experience has shown that it is the outcome of this approach to voting is disastrous, particularly for the most vulnerable members of our society. So I think people need to wake up and start using their brains and thinking critically, and stop supporting these incompetent, buffoonish psychopaths who have come to rule over us.
Laith made the point of saying Israel can't come back from this. Do you think that's true?
100%. 100%. Israel's finished. The genocidal entity is going down the toilet. I don't know when it's going to happen exactly. I believe very strongly it'll happen in my lifetime, and I'm over 60 years old. So I ain't got a lot of years left, and I'm absolutely confident. I'm not a person, Jamarl, who I don't regard myself as an optimist. I don't regard myself as a pessimist. I try to be realistic. And of course, that my judgment isn't perfect and I can make mistakes. I made mistakes about Obama. I thought Obama was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And in 2007, even though I don't even have a right to vote, I got in a car and I drove down to Indianapolis and I spent 10 days of my life away from my legal practice working for Obama's campaign. And then I stupidly came back when he got the nomination. I did the same thing in Pittsburgh. Man, did I feel like a horse's ass within 3 months. So I don't tell you my judgment is perfect. It's not close to perfect, but I try to be realistic. And I don't see how Israel survives. Israel is despised around the world by billions of people. It is turning in upon itself. Its military is becoming increasingly exhausted. Its economy has taken huge hits. The country is suffering a brain drain. I don't see many of those people coming back, the more educated and more mobile members of Israeli Jewish society. A lot of them are gone forever. The idea that Israel has the ability to protect its citizens has been exploded. There are settlements in the north of Israel that have been devastated by attacks by Hezbollah. The rockets are still coming in from Yemen. One hit, as you know, I'm sure, hit.
Yeah, one hit yesterday, Ben Gurion Airport. They have effectively shut the airport down. He'll be back. As he said, the connection is a little dodgy. He'll be back. 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 No, what he's referring to is a rocket landed in Ben Gurion Airport yesterday. And again, they couldn't stop it. And Houthis has pointed out, we're shutting the airlines down. We're not allowing flights in or out of Israel. Airlines. Okay. He'll be back. They've effectively pointed out that we're not allowing flights in or out. From this point on, there's also an air and sea blockade. Yemen seems to be the only one who's doing this, and they've said themselves that they've taken responsibility upon themselves to ensure, basically, considering that some of the other resistance groups have faded out and have been destroyed or damaged, that the responsibility for them has gone up. Now, considering that they've beat the U.S. In a war of deterrence, well, they're now free hand in order to launch these strikes because the United States is not bombing Yemen in the way that it was prior. Welcome back. You're perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine. Finish your point. I was just expanding upon it. That the missile hit Ben Gurion Airport, that they've effectively put an air and sea blockade over Israel.
Correct. And, when I was there in, 2024 in Palestine, I went to the port of Eilat and I saw that it is a ghost port. It's completely inactive. And a few months later, the port declared bankruptcy. You have now indictments hanging over the head of Netanyahu and so forth. And this protests are becoming increasingly intense. There's tremendous instability in Israel. I just don't see how Israel survives in the long term. I think that Hassan Nasrallah was quite correct when he said, I think it was some 20 years ago, that Israel is weaker than a spider's web. I think that's truer today than it has ever been. The horror of the situation is that it retains the capacity to kill a lot of people. And the real question in my mind is not whether Israel is finished. The real question is how many people is it going to kill before it finally, is removed, effaced from existence, because that's exactly what that state now deserves. I'm not talking about the mass killing of the population, of course. I'm talking about the institutions of the state. They have to be dismantled, and Israel has to be brought to an end, and it will be. But the real issue here, and no one is more affected by this, of course, than the Palestinian people, is how many people are these monsters going to kill before their state is finally put out of our misery?
What do you say to the people who say, well, they have went upon this project of Greater Israel? They have expanded the state into parts of Lebanon, parts of Syria. They're about to take all of Gaza. They've expanded the pogroms into the West Bank, meaning they're exerting even more force in regards to their apartheid, with this ultimate objective of stealing that also. I mean, there's a reason they're giving settlers guns, and the military is backing the settlers as they go and kill and steal property. I had a conversation with a guy who lived in the West Bank, who had just been beaten the day before by violent thugs, settlers, with the military standing there backing them as they do it. Like, what do you say to people who say, well, it doesn't seem like they're going anywhere? It seems like they're pursuing this project of Greater Israel. The Quisling governments aren't doing anything about it. So Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, other supposedly Muslim governments stand by and watch this take place. Syria has been destroyed and is now making a deal with Israel. And even Turkey worked with Israel in order to destroy Syria. So they're probably going to come to terms.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would point out that war, there are vicissitudes in war. And so let's look at the Ukrainian conflict. In late 2023, the Ukrainians launched, I was saying, and certainly I'm sure you were saying, many others were saying, Ukraine's going to lose this war. It's doomed. In the latter part of 2022, I should say, when Ukraine launched its massive counteroffensive, it experienced considerable success. It drove the Russians out of Kherson City, out of Liman, out of a whole bunch of areas around Kiev. The amount of territory that Ukraine recovered in the latter half of 2022 was quite substantial. And yet, I never wavered in my judgment, as did others who have far more military expertise than I do, that Russia was going to win this war. And that's exactly what is now happening. So I don't think we should allow our judgment about what will ultimately transpire in this war in West Asia to be determined solely by the current circumstances. Yes, Israel has gained territory. Yes, Israel has killed a lot of people. Yes, Israel has weakened, but it hasn't destroyed Hezbollah. It has helped contribute to the downfall of Assad. But there is resistance. The resistance is fierce. The resistance is multifaceted. The global community is, there are signs that they are beginning to, as I indicated, turn against Israel. Even the corporate media is doing that. This is a long-term war of attrition. That is what we are witnessing here. And the casualties on the Palestinian side are bound to be, not just the Palestinian side, but on the side of the resistance, are bound to be much higher, because Israel has the full backing of the West with all of its military might. It's not because Israel is powerful. This is not Israel. This is a war that the West, that has collectively a military budget in excess of 1.5 trillion at this stage, is waging on the indigenous peoples of West Asia. So in that scenario, they are bound to experience, the indigenous populations, far more casualties, and there will be short-term setbacks. But ultimately, for me, Jamarl, the thing that gives me the greatest confidence that Israel is going to ultimately lose is that Israel's existence and power depends entirely on that of the United States and other major Western states, and they are in rapid decline. There's going to come a point in time when they are going to have to withdraw from West Asia. those military bases are not going to be sustainable over the long term. The United States has so many problems. It'll be forced economically at some point, whether it wants to or not, to withdraw its forces from the region of West Asia, to stop pumping weapons into Israel, to stop suppressing the indigenous populations of the region. It's just a matter of time.
You're thinking kind of like the Soviet Union, where Soviet Union collapses. The analysis of the Soviet Union at the time by the United States had no idea it was going to collapse. And when it did, all of, let's say, the influence that it was exerting in the various places receded. And those places were left to their own devices. And many of those places also fell apart as a result. Okay, that makes sense. I do get that argument that if we're giving 80% of the weapons, bullets, guns, and we stop doing that, then they can't sustain what they're doing. They just can't. So no, I do understand that argument. It's just, God, man, the amount of blood that is going to be between now and then is voluminous. It is voluminous.
The French killed, I was reminded the other day, some 6 million Algerians before they finally achieved their independence. Millions of Algerians. It is entirely possible, if you allow the Israelis to do this, to continue, they could end up killing millions of Palestinians. That's the horrible reality. It's incumbent upon us to do everything within our power to stop this as quickly as possible. But just being realistic about this and looking at historically the kinds of prices that were paid by people who sought their independence from Western imperial powers and their proxies, the Palestinians may be forced to pay a much higher price than they've already paid, which is horrible enough.
That is just shocking. Did you see Trump in Saudi Arabia?
I did. I saw a portion of his, I don't even know where to begin, man. I saw a portion of his speech. So
it was ludicrous. Somebody described it as Hunger Games. And I think it's right. Like, you remember like like Hunger Games is so dead on. Like when you really think about it, like you get people like, the media, like the Piers Morgans of the world, these shiny people who come out and they report. And it's like, I don't know what the media was saying in Canada. In the US, it was like, wow, Donald Trump has cut through the red tape and made these deals with the Middle East in a way that the Biden administration would have loved to do. And then they show him shaking Jelani's hand and they're like, Donald Trump meets the president of Syria and removes sanctions. And it's like, okay. It's like, are you guys serious right now? This guy was chopping off heads a few years ago, and you're acting like he's the president of Syria after he overthrew with his gang of ISIS thugs into the country. But now all of a sudden, he's the president of Syria. He's a good guy. Like, it's astonishing the way the media
had a $10 million bounty on his head in January.
Yeah.
I'm shaking my head. That's what I'm telling you. These people are nut bars. The people who are running our countries are completely insane.
They're super or hyper rational. And what I mean by that is, like, morality doesn't matter. Ethics doesn't matter. From their point of view, we're in a Game of Thrones. And we took 20 years to kill, slaughter, and murder. And we use the worst people on the planet, effectively outright fascists, murderous thugs, in order to do it. But we accomplish our objectives. And now that we accomplish our objectives, we got our man in power. We've carved up Syria. We're going to remove sanctions. So we're going to hope the population backs him in this now that the sanctions have been removed. Like, this is the way they think.
Yeah,
Tell me how.
I don't think it's a sustainable long-term policy to create chaos and devastation all around your proxy, which is what they're doing. They're devastated. Literally, they're just creating a complete breakdown in social order in places that surround, the America's unsinkable aircraft carriers that some people call Israel. I don't think this is a sustainable long-term. Call me optimistic or naive, I don't know, but to me this is nuts. This is absolutely insane. They have I'm sure that they did have the objective of installing a puppet in Syria, but this guy, and this way, and they think this is in the long-term interests of the United States and Israel. They're insane. They're crazy. In the short term, this is going to enable them to achieve some objectives, like this will allow Israel to grab some more land in Syria and so forth. But this is going to come back to bite you in the ass, man. This is what spooks call blowback. Blowback will come. It has happened
9/11.
before, and it will come again.
9/11, right?
Yeah.
Or what's going to happen in Europe when these Ukrainians, they just found out that it was a Ukrainian that set the prime minister's car in the house on fire. Blowback, right? I mean, what are these Ukrainians going to think? These neo-Nazis going to think when that war ends and they lose?
Yeah, and think of Jamarl. Think of all the weapons that are
Yeah.
floating around in Ukraine,
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
unexploded munitions and so forth. That is, the language I've used to describe this will be a festering wound in the heart of Europe for decades to come. What these people have done is utterly insane. It is not in the long-term interests of not just the ordinary peoples of Europe. It's not in the long-term interests of European states or even the elites, what they've done in Ukraine. It utterly, the level of incompetence is astonishing. Astonishing. It's not just a lack of morality. These people are truly stupid, and they're unbelievably ignorant. They have no sense of history whatsoever. They don't understand the cultures. They don't understand the politics of these places. They're like the proverbial bulls in a china shop, and ultimately this will all come back and bite them and us in the ass big time.
But Dimitri, they use the same tactics everywhere around the world. It's like, hey, we need a thick neck fascist to hold a gun. And somebody says, hey, I'm that guy. I'm that guy. It's all right, here's the gun, here's money. You see the government over there, we need you to take it down. Whether it was in South America, whether it was in Ukraine, whether it was in Syria, it's the same tactic over and over again. And as you point out, there's often blowback. The Mujahideen is a really good example. Hey, we need you to go and get after the Russians in Afghanistan. Okay, we'll do it. And then they turn around and we're fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan, who eventually take Afghanistan back. Like, they don't, they have been doing this going all the way back before Napoleon, and they continue to do it. And it seems to be the way, the context of the world that they've effectively set up, that the West has set up, where this is just the way they operate. This is the game in the way they consider it. It's a Game of Thrones. We're on this throne. We want to knock over something else. And so we give these people proxies to do it because we can't have these larger conflicts now because the world would effectively end if we do. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. That seems to be the game plan.
Well, I think they did it better before. They did it.
Yeah.
They were much better at concealing their crimes, first of all. Secondly, they did try to impose some. So, for example, look at the case of Israel. They did impose some constraints on Israel. Those constraints are now completely gone. And there is, in the larger context of things, a massive shift of power happening geopolitically from the Western world to the non-Western world. I think that is the most important factor of all. So these prior tactics, these crimes, these depravities that, as you rightly point out, have been going on, have been perpetrated by Western elites for centuries. We are operating in a different world, and there are also long-term consequences, which the chickens will eventually come home to roost, and that's happening now. That's happening now. The United States is, the election of Donald Trump, I think, is going to accelerate. There's one good thing about his election. It's going to accelerate the end of.
He's saying accelerate the end of the United States, and I agree. I know there's some MAGA who disagrees with us and thinks Donald Trump is a reinvigoration of America. I hate to tell you, I think you all are wrong. If you're playing a game of chess and you are in a drawn position, and in that drawn position, you take aggressive and provocative actions to turn a draw into a win, under chess logic, you will most likely lose. Your position, and I know I'm saying chess, but same difference in this. The basis of reality functions in the same way, even at a lower level. Your position can bear a certain amount, meaning there are certain things that you can do consciously, realistically, in a position based upon your capabilities of that position. If you try to pull too much out of that position, it will become unwieldy, unstable, and it will collapse and you will lose. And Dimitri's point is that the US is taking actions that it can't sustain in the long run. And because it can't sustain in the long run, it is hastening the decline of the United States. I'm sorry, Dimitri, please continue.
Right. So you've summarized it nicely. I think that so look for example, today or yesterday I saw Peter Dow. He posted a statistic which blew my mind, that 60% of Americans can't afford the basic necessities of life. 60%. You think Donald Trump's going to fix that problem? You think American power can be sustained in the face of such grotesque inequality? No, it can't. The United States was strongest when there was a much more equitable distribution of wealth in society in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. This is one of the reasons why American power is in decline, because of the avarice, the unbounded avarice of the American elites, and the destruction of all, semblance of democratic distribution of wealth and democratic exercise of rights. Ultimately, this will bring about the collapse of American power internationally. I'm absolutely convinced about that, and I do think that's going to happen in my lifetime. I think it's happening right now. We're seeing evidence of. I mean, the Ansar Allah just kicked the American military's ass. Ansar Allah. I mean, the Taliban defeated NATO, all of NATO, 20 years. I mean, you're talking that does that look like a hegemon to you? Doesn't look like a hegemon to me.
That article in New York Times was humiliating. Oh man, that article was humiliating. They nearly knocked the F-35 out the sky. They nearly hit aircraft carriers. You've had all these ships fall off the boat. And it also pointed out that Donald Trump's threshold for pain is not much. Like, I suspect that what he was concerned about is, okay, what if that thing does hit an aircraft carrier? Then what? Or what if they do knock an F-35 out the sky? Then what? Like, and you have all this reporting, Ansar Allah just knocked the F-35 out the sky. These sandal-wearing rebels, as we like to consider them in the West, just did that. I mean, I think we need to accept that their technical proficiency is far greater than what we give them credit for. The missiles that were landing in Israel, our THAAD system that costs probably $1 billion to make, and we only have like 5 of them or 6 of them, missed. Iron Dome missed, and they were aiming directly at the missile. You could see the things go by and it, bam, hit it anyway. And they did it again recently. And the firing at the U.S. aircraft carrier, again, those things are getting deadly accurate in their proficiency of hitting their targets. And I would imagine the moment that you hit the target once, you're like, all right, we shoot it from here. This is our target. We got it. We have our aiming correct. We just need to fire it again. Like, none of these things bespeak of success. And by the way, I would add something else. Not being able to win the trade war against China, not being able to win in Ukraine, all of these things are canaries in the coal mines that they are not heeding. They just aren't. Why do you think that it's gotten this way? I mean, we had a burgeoning middle class at some point, meaning you had a rational government-ish that created the middle class and persisted the middle class. Why do you think it changed? Something had to change. Some point of view had to shift. Even if it was slow shift, something had to change.
Well, inherent flaws in our electoral system, I think. So, for example, you didn't use the term, but when you talked about the electoral system in the United States, it's what we Canadians call the first past the post system. So a proportional representation system would be much more democratic and much more sustainable, much more healthy. The campaign finance systems that we have in the West, particularly in the United States, which is completely out of control. There should be public funding of political campaigns. It shouldn't be contingent upon the whims of the wealthy.
It's radically corrupt. By the way, 90% of the people who win this is out the most cash. I don't even need to know your political party. I just need to know how much money you make.
Absolutely. So there you go. I mean, so the elections are being bought and sold, and then you have the structure of the media. You know, the handful of massive corporations, profit-oriented corporations, control the largest media platforms, which results in a badly informed and sometimes completely delusional citizenry, because they're relying upon people whose mission is not to inform the public, but to manipulate the public, and that's what these large media corporations do. So, over time, because of the flaws in the way we designed campaign finance, the electoral system, the media, I think this was bound to happen. So we need to rebuild democratic institutions from the ground up and address these fatal flaws in the system.
I have to ask you, since you're from Canada, what do you think of, what is it, Carney? He, Justin Trudeau, stinks up the PM prime ministership. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but to such a degree that they assume that the conservative is going to win. Trump gets in. He starts saying that Canada is going to be the 51st state, that he's stealing Greenland, stealing the Panama Canal, renaming the Gulf of Mexico. But Canadians took umbrage at Donald Trump effectively saying, hey, it would be great if you're the 51st state. You're going to be the 51st state. He starts mocking Trudeau, saying Trudeau was crying in his office or on the phone and stuff like this, basically belittling Canada. Canadians get they take umbrage at this. And the Liberal candidate comes out of the blue to win it on the back of outrage at Donald Trump, because they're looking for somebody who's going to be strong against Trump, not necessarily dealing with domestic priorities. There was an older woman who was like, fuck Trump or something like that. She said it on camera. Like, she says, I voted because of Trump. Fuck that guy. And the woman was like 90 years old. And it was like, well, personally, I love seeing old people curse. I think it's the greatest thing in the world. I think it's the funniest thing ever. But give me your take on that. I mean, is he really this tough guy against Trump? I mean, he did come here and kiss the ring.
I refer to him affectionately as Prime Minister Goldman Sachs. So I tell you all you want to know. I did a live stream with some political commentators in Canada recently where we talked about this. If you look at how Canadians, according to the polling, were ranking the tariff threats from Donald Trump, and if you look at the difference between how they perceived Mark Carney's ability to deal with Trump versus his adversary's ability to deal with Trump, the bottom line is you cannot explain what happened solely or even primarily by virtue of Trump, with reference to Trump. Trump was a factor in the reversal of fortunes of the Liberal Party, but the reversal of fortunes of the Liberal Party didn't begin when Donald Trump started threatening to annex Canada, and when Donald Trump started, threatening a tariff war against Canada. They began the real reversal of fortunes. It was a stunning reversal of fortunes when Mark Carney replaced Justin Trudeau as the prime minister, and people had really no rational basis to believe that Mark Carney was going to be much better than Justin Trudeau in dealing with Donald Trump. Mark Carney's a banker. He was at the central bank and the Bank of England. He was completely beholden to the elites in those capacities. He himself is a wealthy individual. His politics are no different from those of Justin Trudeau. If you look at him on all the major issues, he's exactly where Trudeau is. All that happened was the face changed. And so this goes back to what I was saying earlier. In Canada, what we just witnessed was a dramatic example of people making voting decisions based upon superficial considerations. If they were looking and listening carefully to what Carney was saying and thinking critically about his record as a banker, they would have realized that Mark Carney was not well equipped ethically or intellectually to stand up for Canada's interests and defend our sovereignty and help us to cope with these tariffs, which were coming for sure. But they just assumed because he's a different face and because the media loved him, the Canadian media just did everything it could to promote Mark Carney. They really wanted to see the central banker become the prime minister. They got hoodwinked, and now we're stuck with Mr. Goldman Sachs, Prime Minister Goldman Sachs. And personally, I have no confidence in Mark Carney to protect Canada's interests. One of the things Mark Carney should be doing, the very first thing, the top, and I've been arguing this for years, before Trump started threatening Canada with annexation, Canada should be made much more self-sufficient. It has all of the attributes necessary, resource-wise, an educated population, territorially, to be largely self-sufficient and not to have to rely upon trade with external actors like the United States. But that's going to require massive government investment. You can't rely upon the private sector to do that. And this, by the way, is a big problem the United States is going to confront. Donald Trump isn't talking about using public investment to reindustrialize the United States. It's going to take massive amounts of public investment. He thinks all you got to do is slap tariffs on people, and all of a sudden the United States is going to experience a golden age of reindustrialization. This is delusional. So Carney's not talking about doing any of that. Not even in essential sectors like the pharmaceutical sector. We used to have in Canada a world-class state-owned pharmaceutical manufacturer. It was sold off by the Liberals and the Conservatives, and now we rely upon foreign for-profit private pharmaceutical manufacturers, which was potentially a huge problem for us during the pandemic. And it caused us to spend enormous sums of money, and we had to stand in queue behind other, buyers who were more wealthy than Canada, like the United States and some European states. In any event, Carney, there's no objective reason to think that Carney is going to do what's necessary to protect us from the breakdown of globalization. No objective reason at all.
Yeah. As I was telling people before you came back on, like Donald Trump is an accelerant, but he's incompetent. Like even in cases where he kind of define a problem, he gets it wrong. Like it's like, hey, I think 2 + 2 is, the problem. But I think the answer is 1,356. Like he does stuff like that, where it's like, how did you get that answer? And so he would say, okay, we need to reindustrialize in the US. We've deindustrialized. Okay, fair enough. I accept that, right? But then he would say, so we need to have a tariff war against the entirety of the world. Okay, that's not a solution, bro. I'm sorry, it's not. And it's not like he's investing in education in order to fund these factories. It's not like he's investing in the factories, like meaning investing money, public money, in order to get this stuff straight. What he believes is that with tariffs, prices will increase to such a degree that they can sustain companies in the US with Americans paying more for regular items. So the t-shirt that costs $5, well, if we pay $20 for the t-shirt, then we can have a factory in America making those t-shirts and pay people $10 an hour. That is his thinking. Like that private enterprise by itself would come back to the US in order to do these jobs. This is nonsense. Like even with the tariffs, it's nonsense. I mean, but that's in his mind. And it's like, okay, well, are you going to give public funding to education so people can train in these areas? Nope. Are you going to, how many years are you willing to invest in this? Oh, it's going to be almost overnight. Okay. Yeah. Let's see if that works. It's nonsense. I thought Canada was different though. Like, no, look, from an American perspective, we think you guys are kind of like Europe and North America.
Well, let me just park that for a second and say I want to come back to this very important question you're asking. But to give you an example of how Mark Carney is misdiagnosing, how he's missing the forest from the trees. I have, as I just articulated, my view is that we need to invest massively using public funds to enable Canada to become self-sufficient to a large degree, which it can be. Okay, what is Carney's solution? Carney is trying to deepen our trade relations with the Europeans at a time when the Europeans are in rapid decline. He's like this, the European project is a Titanic. It's hit an iceberg and it's sinking, and he wants to hitch our boat to the sinking Titanic. I mean, this is his prescription for dealing with the new world order that Donald Trump is bringing about through this tariff war. It's insane. What is the man thinking? He's out of his mind. He has.
Let me ask you, what is he thinking? I'm sorry to interrupt, but you make a really good point. What is he thinking? I mean, what is it? Just he's liberal, and so for him, globalism is.
He's a dogmatist. I can understand if he was saying, the economic future is in the East, so we're going to develop our trade relations with China, or with Thailand, and with Vietnam, and so forth, and Russia. Okay, the BRICS. Brazil. But no, we can't have any discussions about that because he is a neocon and a dogmatist. So where else can you look? If you exclude the non-Western world, okay, and particularly the BRICS, and your your biggest trading partner by far is shitting all over you, as the United States is. What's left?
Dimitri, oh God, man, that leads to such a whole nother can of worms. Thank you for this. I'm not going to keep you. I guess this goes to this kind of globalism question. Like, are these just so dogmatic about globalism that they just can't wed themselves away from it? That's what it seems like. But man, thank you for this. And just so the audience will know, Dimitri Lascaris, he is a journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. In 2020, he ran for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada. Dimitri, you be safe. Thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it. Okay, he is frozen, but that's okay because that's good timing for him being frozen. I would like to bring in my next guest. I am deeply happy that I could get him for this. I am deeply appreciative that he's joining me. We're joined with Chief Master Sergeant Dennis Fritz. He is I'm trying to get this right. He is Command Chief Master Sergeant of the United States Air Force, retired, I should say. He is currently the director of Eisenhower Media Network with the mission to promote peace and diplomacy over war. While on active duty, he served as the principal senior advisor to 4-star commander of Pacific Air Force and Air Force Space Command, just wow. He also held additional duty as senior enlisted advisor to the commander of the North American Aerospace Defense Command, basically NORAD. He is author of the book, Deadly Betrayal, The Truth About Why the United States Invaded Iraq. Chief Master Sergeant Dennis Fritz, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for this. How you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Your record is astonishing. That is an amazing pedigree. In fact, there's a lot more to that bio. I just made it shorter just for the show itself. What should I call you? Is it Chief Master Sergeant? Is that correct?
Oh, you got it. When I talk to many hosts, they always, sometimes, mix it up a little bit, but you got it perfectly. You can just go back. If you want to use my military title, it's Chief.
Okay, Chief. Okay. Mm-hmm. People who play Halo, they love Master Sergeant. that's the character, Master Chief.
Yeah.
But no, thank you for joining me, man. When I asked you, I was like, okay, well, what? I wasn't sure how closely you were following some of the military campaigns, which is why I asked you to get more context. But you effectively are covering everything, so that is even better. Mm-hmm. As you point out, peace over war. What do you think of these negotiations taking place in Istanbul?
Well, it's fun. That's interesting that you start out with that. I'm following that real closely, and I think, as you mentioned about the Eisenhower Media Network, any peace movement, any diplomatic movement is good. There are going to be some ups and downs in regards to that, but I support what is being done in regards to peace in the Ukraine war, Russia war. I don't call the war in Gaza or the conflict in Gaza a war because it's a massacre. But in regards, and I'm assuming you're talking about conversations, Turkey has been involved as well in trying to bring peace to Russia and Ukraine war, and then another conflict, the Pakistan India conflict that we must be discussing peace in. And so we can talk about any of those, but I will tell you, peace and diplomacy is the best way forward, regardless of any of those conflicts. And we can go into detail of which one you want to talk about.
Let's start with Russia first, and we can move to the other ones, because I've been hitting the Israel thing all day. That is just a massacre at this point that we've been backing. I mean, it ghastly, to put it mildly. We've been funding it to the tune of like 80%. It's just astonishing. As I told my other audience, I would have never believed that. Look, as an American, I have somewhat of a warped point of view on this stuff. And like, nobody at the radio station thought Russia was going to go into Ukraine. But again, you're talking about a country that's been invaded twice through Ukraine. The last time they lost 30 million people, the time before that, 10 million people in the First World War. You're talking about Napoleon invading, like meaning it's a country that has had to deal with Western invasions over and over and over again. And they're seeing this putsch that overthrew the democratically elected government in 2014 with this raising of this largest military in Europe. Okay, so yeah, you're going to be dodgy about your borders under those terms.
Well, let me get going on that now. You done got me all pumped up now.
Okay,
I do want to talk about the Gaza massacre too later, even though you've talked about it, because you need to hear the history about that. And that's why I wrote my book, Deadly Betrayal, but it ties into what's going on in Gaza now. But let's talk about Russia and Ukraine for a moment there.
Yeah.
Back in May of 2023, the Eisenhower Media Network put out a New York Times paid ad in regards to the history of the Russia-Ukraine war.
Did you?
Yes, we did. So you and your audience can Google that. New York Times paid ad. The title is "The America Should Be a Force for Peace." And what we did, let me just tell you this. Let me just give you a quick story of this. When the Soviet Union disbanded in the 90s and the Warsaw Pact was led by the Soviet Union at the time, and it was a counterpart to NATO. And when Gorbachev and President Reagan at the time came to agreement that they were going to disband the Soviet Union, at the time, we told the Soviet Union that we would not expand NATO any further because they were counterparts. The Warsaw Pact, NATO.
Is a famous again? 1 inch to the east.
Wow, my man, you got it. And we told them that. And that's documented in the archives now, that we told them that. But guess what we did? We expanded NATO, and we kept expanding it. To finally, Russia's red line was Ukraine. And Russia threatened that they would attack Ukraine. Now, I must tell you, I was not confident they were going to do that. I said, no, they're not going to do that. But they were serious about that because they've given us a number of warnings. Now, to put this in context, what I tell different folks about this so you understand, because people like myself and others who explain this to the American people, some of the pundits come out and say, oh, you're a mouthpiece for Russia. No, we're not a mouthpiece for Russia. We're telling the truth about our imperialism. This war, on behalf of us, being done by the Ukrainians who are being killed each and every day, their infrastructure is being killed each and every day, is based on us pushing this. Now, to put this in context, I want you to think about this, your audience. If Russia was to have, and we have a map of this in that New York Times paid ad, okay, the U.S. should be a force for peace. We put a map. If Russia were to have nuclear weapons, fighter aircraft based in Canada and based in Mexico, we would lose our minds. We would be going crazy in fear because the response time of a nuclear weapon is already has been shortened if you have Russian missiles in Canada or Mexico. Well, that's what we did to Russia. See, we, the United States of America, have no empathy for others' security. Russia has security needs. China has security needs. We have security needs. Iran has security needs. But we only think our security is more important. Well, those countries think they're important as well. So Russia warned us and told us that if you continue to expand NATO, Ukraine is the red line, and we will fight for our security. And that is why this war has started. Now, let me tell you something else. This war could have been prevented and stopped. The Ukrainians and the Russians had come to a deal to not have this war. But we, the United States of America, and the United Kingdom, we push Ukrainians in going to the war. Zelensky, we told them we will back you if you went to. Now, why do we want to go to war? It is part of America's imperialism. We want to control the world. That's a fact. I tell folks I can give you opinions, assumptions, and facts. Well, that's a fact. We have what we call America's exceptionalism. We can do what we so desire in the world, but nobody else can. Now, why do we want this war? Because of the fact we want to weaken Russia. That gives the United States more power. But at the same time, we are using Ukraine to fight this proxy war on our behalf. And that's a fact.
How you were in the belly of the beast in real terms. I mean, your military pedigree is equal to nobody, right? I mean,
well, I wouldn't say that now. I wouldn't
Okay,
say that,
fair
but
enough,
I have
but-
been blessed. All those titles that you gave me, being out in major headquarters in the field. Also, you add to that, like you said, there's some things you could have had. I spent half my life in the Pentagon as well, so I know the ins and outs of the Pentagon, and I know
Precisely
the
my
history.
point.
So I've been blessed in that way. But there may have been others. But I got to tell you, yeah, I'm probably one in few that has spent half my life in the Pentagon, and at the same time, to be able to go to some of these field headquarters and advise four-star generals.
So are they for this? I mean, they have to know that. Or let me ask you this. Let me ask the question this way. As Americans, I would tell you that when I was working at the radio station and this was about to take place, none of us believed it was going to happen. And as I tell people, I think that's because I have an American point of view. We have two oceans on our shores. Nobody is invading us. We have Canada and Mexico on our borders. Nobody is invading us. We have $1 trillion military. Nobody is trying to invade us. And so from our point of view, is governed by the fact that we live in relative safety. Okay, that's not really true if you're in Russia and NATO is expanding to your border and you see this band of fascists that have taken over a country knowing full well they have the full backing of the West, and they've blown off Minsk agreements 1 and 2, they've blown off the Istanbul agreements, meaning they were clearly hostile. They've been attacking the Donbass with the US consent. And so the Russian point of view is different. Meaning we got it wrong for the very fact that their point of view is different. What is the thinking in the Pentagon? How, like, when they're looking at this stuff and they're wargaming this stuff out, are they thinking they're bluffing? Or are they thinking this is a Hobbes choice? If they invade, we can bog them down in a military campaign similar to Afghanistan with the Mujahideen. Or if they don't, then we have NATO on their border where we can continue to push and push further. What are they thinking when they're looking at the world in this way? Meaning, because I don't know, I haven't been into it, but I'm always curious about what they're thinking internally into these organizations.
Yeah, let me just share this with you. As the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, as it's stated, Department of Defense. In most cases, let's say, for instance, let's not talk about the civilian leadership, which is the Secretary of Defense. Let's talk about the military general officers, like the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the service chiefs, which are the 4 stars that run the particular services. In most cases, if they've been to war, they don't want to go to war if they've seen it up close. And they try to advise against war most of the time because of the fact they've seen it. They know what happens during war. Now, when you talk about Russia, for example, we don't want a war with Russia because of the fact that leads to nuclear exchanges. And I can tell you, as part of one of my assignments, when you talk about, I was an advisor to the commander of Space Command. Well, at the time, we were the owners of our land-based nuclear arsenal. I've seen our ballistic missiles up and close personally, and you don't want to see that exchange. And so in most cases, you know, you got to understand the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the service chief, they're advisors to the civilian leadership. And I must be frank with you, in most cases, it is the civilian leadership and civilian policy makers that are always talking about wars. You know, different administrations come in with agendas. You know, you have different factions in our United States of America. I'm sure, you know, as I listen to you talk, listen, I said, man, he is so sharp. I'm talking about you tomorrow. And I got to tell you, you know, you've heard this term neocons and neoconservatives, and they're war pushers. They believe in America's exceptionalisms. And this goes all the way back to the Soviet Union and President Reagan in wanting to defeat the Soviet Union. Well, we went around and bragged about that. We defeated the Soviet Union. Remember, once again, that is civilian leadership. That is policymakers, administrators. They come in with agendas. And when you look at the Republican Party, and I'm going to change up on you in a minute, they've always been a war party. They believe in this exceptionalism and imperialism. Now, unfortunately, the Democratic Party has become that way too. And that stems from my history of being in the Pentagon. And then, of all things, when I talk about the war in Iraq, this is in my book, Daily Betrayal, too. Well, the turn of the Democrats becoming a war party as well to compete with the Republicans came about during the first Iraq war. You had people like Hillary Clinton, Biden, And at the time, boy, I'm looking at his face. I can't remember who was running for president at the time. You had the Republicans saying that the Democrats were weak on defense. You remember, I see you smiling. They were weak on defense. And I have that in my book. That was the change of the Democratic Party becoming a war party. Now, why do we do that? War is profiteering. You know, there's a saying, I don't know if you heard this, and there was a General Smedley Butler, who said the profiteering of war. And likewise, my organization, the Eisenhower Media Network, Eisenhower warned us, beware of the military-industrial complex. And so you have civilian organizations and administrations that come in pushing these wars, where you have those in the Pentagon try to persuade them not to do that. But at the same time, what you must understand is that the generals in the Pentagon, their job is to advise and then, unfortunately, follow the orders of the civilian leadership. And that's how these things take place, of going to war.
That is amazing. And that's disheartening, because it seems like both political parties, as you pointed out, function the same way. Like, it doesn't matter which flavor you get, both effectively end up in the same idea of, it puts you in mind of the Brits a little bit, where they, you know, despite the fact that the sun has set on the British Empire, they still walk around, you know, like they're masters of the world. They can't even put 10,000 troops out, and yet they walk around like the masters of the world, because they used to own 51% of the globe after the First World War. It's that, right? It's the thing that comes in our heads of, well, we're America. We must, you know, control. We must dictate. Despite the fact losing a war, we still must act as if we won it. And it seems to get into the heads of the various presidents. I mean, it doesn't seem to matter who. It's fascinating to me that the generals tend to express caution. Hey, maybe you don't want to do that. And yet the civilian leadership pushes and pushes and pushes. Wow, that is amazing. I mean,
let me share one of the things you said just now when you said the Brits and so forth too. I tell folks, we in the United States of America, the country's building, we are the child of the UK, the colonialisms who spread throughout, not only here, but in Africa. The United States of America have the genes of the UK, and the UK runs around, they brag on our shoulders because of the fact they see the United States of America as their child. We took over the world at one time. Now our child, the United States of America, those first 13 states are controlling the world. That is our child. Yeah. And that's why they see themselves about, and that's why you see us working so closely together. Think about that. I shared it with my audience. Think about that. The United States of America is a child of the United Kingdom.
Is there a way to get peace in Ukraine short of Zelensky leaving? Like, look, I think these negotiations are theater. I don't believe that peace works in every situation. There's sometimes where people need to lose. I think the Nazis needed to lose. I think the band of Banderites that are in there now need to lose. And they don't want to stop. Like, despite the fact that they're being pushed on all fronts, they're snatching people off the streets in order to press into military, haberdashers, dancers, going into nightclubs, snatching people. They still continue to push and push and push. Zelensky, whose life is at stake if he signs anything, goes out there knowing full well that he can't agree to it, and yet they want to entice Donald Trump. So Trump says, hey, you better go to Istanbul. So he says, okay, I'll go to Istanbul. Like he clearly doesn't want to. And he's even there now saying, well, I'm only going to talk about a ceasefire. Okay, dude, the Russians have sent military people to accept your surrender, or at the very least to go for where they were at the Istanbul agreements. I think they're open to a deal, but it has to be a deal to settle all of it, not the ceasefire nonsense, meaning, no troops in Europe. That's a non-starter. Ukrainian military is going to be decapitated, or at the very least decreased to a level where it can't threaten us in this way again. We'll be there to expend 100,000 Russians to deal with it. Yeah. Demilitarization, denazification, which means that government needs to change, and no expansion of NATO. Now,
let me say this. Let me mention this when you say no expansion of NATO. Well, that's already occurred. That's
Yeah,
not.
they're surrounded at this point.
Yeah, but let me just say this though. Yes, do I believe peace can happen? As I mentioned to you before, there was already a peace agreement between the Ukrainians and Russia. That's a fact. Again, as I try to give you opinions, but man, I'm trying to think of Boris Johnson. He went into Ukraine to say, no. We got you, the UK, our father, the child. We're the child. Hey, we got your back in the UK and the United States of America. United States of America, not the UK though. But Boris Johnson went in there. Okay, just say that. Now, can there be peace? Yes, but it's going to be some give and take. When you talk about expanding NATO, what's going to happen? And I was so glad when you mentioned that Donbass region. Those are Russian-speaking people. The Ukrainians were bombing them, and Russia told them to stop that as well. So in order to have peace, which I think, there's no doubt in my mind, even though I'm not in his head, that Trump supports that with some of these so-called neocons and American exceptionals that keep pushing this war. The Ukrainians are going to have to give up that Donbass region because those are Russian-speaking people who want to be a part of Russia. The other thing that they're going to have to give up too is Crimea. If you're not familiar with that, I know you probably are, but for your audience, that is an ocean, that's a port that Russia sees they need. They gave it to Ukraine years ago, but they want it back now because that is their access to the Northern Sea, I think it is. And they need that for their security as well. So I think once somebody Zelensky, an understanding that, hey, you're going to probably have to give up Donbass, which he's saying no right now. You're going to have to give up. He's saying no. But let me just tell you this. Sometimes you can say that, but you're going to have to give that up because what you must understand as well, you talk about the carnage that's happening in Gaza right now. Let it be no doubt in your mind, if Russia desired to do that, they could completely destroy, without any nuclear weapons, they could completely destroy the infrastructure of Ukraine. Let that be no doubt in your mind if they so desire to do that. But they haven't done that. They've sacrificed thousands and thousands of their troops, but they can totally destroy Ukraine and their infrastructure if they so desire at any time.
Yeah, Sevastopol, Khrushchev gave it up. As 90% or more of the people chose to leave, and Zelensky's still like, nope, we're not giving that up. That's Ukrainian territory.
Yeah, let me just say something. But one thing, I'm not a Trump fan at all, but I agree with all this. Zelensky, who are you to be saying no? He will be nothing without us. You don't see, even though you talk about some of these countries, Poland, for example, they'll come in for the rescue of them. Yeah, right. Everybody's looking on the backs of our shoulders to do that. Okay, so Zelensky, I think Trump's talking about, hey, who are you to be saying what you're not going to do? If we backed out of that, what is he going to do?
Well, that's the rub. Why doesn't Trump just walk? I mean, he could have came in and said, this is, Joe Biden's war. I'm done. Call it quits.
But see, you got to understand the Washington, D.C. area. That's a good question. I think he would. I really do. I'm going to give you two things here. I really think he would. Even President Obama went through this. I was disappointed in him, in Gaddafi, in some of the wars, in Syria. But there are people in the Washington, D.C. area. Listen, the lobby is strong here in the D.C. I live right outside of D.C. As I told you, half my life has been in the Washington, D.C. area and in the Pentagon. And there's a lot of pressure to push these presidents. I think he would walk. Now, at the same time, Trump is transactional. He looks at what can I get out of this? He says, now, there are a lot of what I would call American oligarchs, the billionaires that support him. But what they don't like about him, he says the quiet part out loud. When you were talking about all these wars, listen, none of these wars, and you take this to the bank, I've been in the Pentagon, I would give World War II a pass and the attack on Pearl Harbor. But every one of the wars that we've had since the Korean War has been about us chasing ghosts. It's been about minerals and profiteering. Every one of them. You take that to the bank. That is a fact. Now, Trump says the quiet part out loud. We want to control the minerals that are in Ukraine. We don't want Russia to have those minerals. And the quiet part out loud, you remember he kept saying, hey, we can do a deal. he actually said in the beginning, he told us he really wanted all their minerals. Now, Zelensky went crazy to give that up. That's why they had that big argument in the White House. You know, they just want Trump is transactional. Hey, I want all the, then we'll support you. You remember that? We'll support you.
Wanted it all. Yeah.
See, there you go. And so I think he would have walked away, but somebody told him, hey, oligarchs, we can get some of those minerals. We can get mining rights into Ukraine. Whether it be in the Middle East, that is all about oil. That's why we want to control the Middle East. That's why Israel wants to control the Middle East. And we can talk about that another time. But I really think Trump would have walked away. I really do. And then somebody reminded me, hey, there's a lot of minerals. Then he said the quiet part out loud, almost like he said, hey, why didn't we take the oil in Iraq, when we went and invaded?
Well, they took the oil in Syria, and he said, well, we got the oil. We took the oil. We took the oil. We capped the oil.
I am so glad you said that. Listen, let me just mention that, too, when I talk about these wars.
Yeah.
We had no right having troops in Syria. They were a sovereign country under Assad. But we had troops under the disguise of fighting ISIS. Those countries can take care of ISIS if they wanted to, but we want to be in there probably funding ISIS. But we had no right, and we were doing it through the American. I'm so glad you said that, because the American people need to understand this. We were not in there about ISIS. We were in there about the oil fields, protecting that to provide oil to Israel, And so that is why.
I mean,
the new guy.
Shook my hand yesterday. Yeah. He just, this guy's a
I tell you how it is. It's transactional, I have no problem with being this new guy, but remember one time, this new guy was a so-called terrorist.
Yes.
He was
the leader of ISIS. He was one of the leaders
of
ISIS.
One of these. Yeah, exactly. That's why he can't go into Iraq right now. They're having a big summit with the Arabs in Iraq right now that they're hosting, and he will not be going because of the fact the Iraqis are upset at him because he was running part of the ISIS in Iraqi at one time.
Can we talk about your book, Betrayal? I have to be honest. People like Colonel Wilkerson, people like yourself, I am fascinated by the arc that you guys have taken. And what I mean by that is there's a perception that people in the military tend to be on the right. I mean, family members, my ex had family members who was in the military and were like voting for Romney. They had this hardcore right-wing point of view about military power and that type of stuff. And even when Colonel Wilkerson was under Colin Powell, there was this belief that, okay, these guys are backing this war. But as you're saying, they're captured on some level. They're, we have civilian leadership in the United States, and civilian leadership sets the agenda for what takes place. Your book, Betrayal, that is a character arc, I suppose. I mean, I haven't had the opportunity to read the book. But I would imagine that at some point along the way, you came to this realization, like Smedley Butler, as you pointed out, this is a racket. This is not, for whatever the propaganda is that they say it is. It's not that. It's not a noble pursuit. They're doing it for other reasons, and they're using American lives to leverage to accomplish those objectives.
Right. I'm so glad you said using American lives. And that was the reason why I wrote the book. And I want to give you a quick history of that. I don't know how much time we have, but I'll give you what you need.
You have space. Yeah.
You notice the title, Deadly Betrayal. And I entitled it Deadly Betrayal because of the fact 4,500 men and women of our United States military died based on a WMD lie on behalf of Israel. Now, let me tell you why I wrote this book. After 9/11, all of us were frightened, didn't know what was going on. That was the first time we had been attacked truly, in the mainland, not counting Pearl Harbor. We were attacked. Nobody knew what was going on. We were all afraid. When Bush came in and said, we're going to war, and I appreciate you doing that, we're going to war to defend our nation, everybody was on board with that. We wanted revenge, and we supported that. But we in the military, after we defeated the Taliban, first of all, who had not done anything to us, the Taliban, but that was just an open door window to go into Iraq. Now, let me just tell you something. We always wanted to go into Iraq, And before 9/11 happened, when the George Bush administration came in, he was surrounded by the neocons, if you will, the warmongers. And they had a plan since 1991. Some of the names you may have heard, like a guy named Paul Wolfowitz, who was the Deputy Secretary of Defense. Back in 1991, he was an Undersecretary of Defense at the time. And he wrote a page called the Defense Policy Guidance. And part of that was, we, the United States world, will control the entire world, to include the Soviet Union. But there's different factions to that. There was a major faction that was full supporters of Israel. And they surrounded President Bush, and they took control of the Pentagon at the time. Now, what do I mean? They were in critical positions at the Pentagon. And they decided, Bibi Netanyahu, what is happening right now in Gaza, he always wanted to do. Always. But the Bush administration at the time had close relations with him. The guy who I worked under, Douglas Feith, who was the Undersecretary of Defense of Policy, he was the number 3 guy in the Pentagon. He had a close relationship with Bibi Netanyahu. And so he told him, hey, listen, we can't go in and do the carnage that you want to do to take over the entire Gaza Strip, because you would kill too many people. But what we're going to do is, at the time, the 3 countries that we could not control, we had a peace deal with Jordan, a peace deal with Egypt, but the renegades, if you will, those that were fighting back against us were Saddam in Iraq, Assad in Syria, and the Ayatollahs in Iran. And so the neocons came into the Pentagon in the George Bush's administration to say, hey, listen, we're not going to go in urban warfare and kill all these people, which we did anyhow in Iraq. But what we're going to do, we're going to have military-to-military conflict. We're going to go in and attack Iraq first. Why? Well, remember I said it crossed over in the different administrations. Under the Clinton administration, it was creation of what we call the regime change policy, meaning we're going to go in and change the regime in Iraq. Now, what gives us the right to do that in a sovereign country? But he never did that. And so when the neocons came in and took control of the Pentagon and Bush's foreign policy, they said, we got to come up for a reason to attack Iraq that the American people will support. They couldn't come up with anything. If you look at the history, and I want to help you understand, during the first Iraq war back in 1990, when we attacked Iraq because to get them out of Kuwait, okay, there were neocons at the time, Wolfowitz being one of those, wanted us to stay there. But guess what? Guess who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time? Colin Powell, a general. And he said, no, we're not going there to control them. And believe it or not, Cheney was the Secretary of Defense at the time, and he agreed with Colin Powell. And we came out. Those neocons were upset.
Now, wait a minute. Wait, I'm sorry. Dick Cheney agreed to not go into Iraq at the time?
That was in the 90s, the first Gulf War. Yeah. Cheney became a changed person. We can talk about that too. There's a lot of. I'll tell you.
I'm sorry, that. Please. That would be shocking to the audience. That's shocking. To me.
Again, we came out of Iraq based on the recommendation of the Pentagon. There were neocons that wanted us to stay to control it, but Powell said, "No, we got a mission. We went in and we got that mission. We got Saddam out of Kuwait. We're coming home now." Now we did keep the resilience forces there. And what we had a military operation called Southern Watch and Northern Watch. Well, we said at the time, Saddam could not use his weapons to, guess what? To attack the Shia in the southern part of Iraq and the Kurds in the northern part. We were going to protect them. Okay. So we kept some forces over there, but we were not going to control Saddam, and we left them in power. And there were neocons that were upset at that. Wolfowitz being one of those, who was an Undersecretary of Defense in the Pentagon at the time. Now, yeah, that's surprising, but we'll get to Cheney in a few minutes. But Cheney became a changed man, okay? Now, with that said, when this new administration came in, and how Cheney became the vice president, you must understand, is he was hired as the transition guy for President Bush. And, the transition is one to help them pick their cabinets. They were looking for a vice president, and Cheney said, hey, why not me? And then here came all these neocons who helped Bush get into office. Now, they came in with a sole mission of, hey, we didn't take over Iraq that first time, but we're going to do it this time while we have the power to do it. So when they came in January of 2001, their sole goal, their first foreign policy thing was to go into Iraq, but they had to have a reason to do that. And they couldn't come up with anything. They were going to use lies. This in the book. People need to read this book. It's in the book. They were going to use lies to say, hey, Saddam attacked the Kurds in the north. He used helicopters, which he wasn't supposed to use. He was going to attack the Shia. Because what people understand that part of the country, when I say that in Iraq was split into Sunnis, which was the minority sect of Islam and in Iraq. And then you had the Shias, who was actually the dominant, which are now. And then you had the Kurds. And so they were really split. So Saddam kept everybody under control under umbrella. But once we went in there, they all segregated. The Shia took over the south, the Kurds took over the north, and Saddam had whatever was left over. So we were looking for excuses. We couldn't find an excuse to go to war where people were supported. Guess what happened? Unfortunately, 9/11 happened. Scared, I hate to use this term, but scared the hell out of the American people. We were willing to go to war. They created this war on terror. Think about this for a moment. Why did they create this war on terror? It's in the book so that we could go in under the disguise of the war on terror and go after those governments, Saddam, Assad, the Ayatollah, who allegedly supports terrorism. We're going to take those governments out. Now, the big question is, why do we want to take these governments out? This is a fact in support of Israel, so that Israel could take over Palestine and the Gaza Strip, kick the people out, and make it all of Israel. That is why we went to war in Iraq. Deadly betrayal, lying about WMD, war on terror. We were scared to death after 9/11. They said Saddam could give weapons of mass destruction to terrorists to come over here and attack us. So we must take him out. That was a lie, all on behalf of Israel, a lie. That's why I wrote the book. When I got back and I retired from the Air Force, somehow I found myself back in the Pentagon working with those nuts. The guy I was working for, Doug Feith, was writing his so-called book to defend what they did. I was working for him, helping him to write his book. When I saw the lies he was doing, I was part of the declassification team. I said, these guys, you heard the term cherry picking intel to go to war? They definitely did that. That's in the book too. As he was writing the book to tell lies, I started writing my own book and said, one day I'm going to counter those lies of them, because 4,500 military men and women lost their lives based on a lie, and 1 million Iraqis lost their lives. That's what made me write this book. Now, let me just say one other thing. I know you're going to jump in. Let me say one thing, how it ties into today. We told Bibi, you're not going to go in there. We're going to take care of this. Once we knock out those governments, then Hamas and Hezbollah are not going to have the military support they need, to challenge Israel. Now, let me tell you something. As I tell my family and friends, one other question. Remember, family and friends, you said about the military tends to be, more conservative and all that. We are indoctrinated when you come into the military. So that goes all the way back. Remember, I said the Republicans back in the day were considered the war party, the military party. Well, when you come into the military, usually when the Democrats were in office, you'll remember this, the military budgets would decline back then. We would get low pay raises in the military. All of a sudden, the Republicans, Reagan, would come in and say, hey, we're going to give the military raises. We're going to support you. Yeah, we're going to support you. We're going to send you off the war, but we're going to give you military pay raises. That's what causes the military folks to become more conservative and usually side with the Republicans, more so general officers. Why? Because the general officers get their weapons of choice under the Republican Party. So that's why, like Powell. Powell was a Republican. He was a moderate Republican, but he grew up in that environment under the Reagan. He was Reagan's national security advisor, as a 3-star general. And then Cheney, the family, they hired him. So he grew up in that environment of being a Republican, but he was a moderate Republican. So that's why you see that, as far as that. But now let me get back to what I was going to say about this in regards to Bibi. And now, when we went into Iraq, you heard about, remember, the insurgency, and that's in the book too. We got bogged down. Our plan was to go in and take out Saddam and then Syria next under the disguise of fighting terrorism. Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, where Syria had so-called chemical weapons too. There you go, that we had to get rid of. And so we were going into Syria next under the disguise of fighting terrorism and getting rid of their chemical weapons. However, we got bogged down in the insurgency in Iraq because they fought back. That's where the 4,500 died. Now, fast forward to October the 7th. Oh, let me just say one other thing. I got to get this out too, because many people have said this. I said I give you opinions, assumptions, and facts. There are many people on the far right and the friends of the far left have wanted me to say 9/11 was an inside job. I can't say that. That's where you have the conspiracy theories. But there's some that believe that. Highly educated people that believe that. Even engineers that have told me believe that, because they say the way those buildings came down, the aircraft couldn't have done that. It was like a demolized. It was just a controlled demolization. And they say that. Now, here's what I can tell you. This is going to shock you and your audience. And this is a fact because I know it and saw it myself. There were people in the Pentagon that was glad that it happened. Let me say that again.
Excuse me?
There were people in the Pentagon that were glad that it happened. Now, why were they glad that it happened? Once again, that gave them the excuse to implement their plan that they came in January. Listen to what I just said earlier. Under the disguise of war on terror, we can never allow that to happen to us again. So now we have to take out those governments. That gave them an excuse to go into Iraq and to plan to Syria next and then Iran last, because of the fact we were hit by 9/11. That gave them the rationale. You remember I was saying they were trying to find excuses to go in to Iraq to implement their plan? Well, 9/11 gave them that excuse to go in and fight those wars under the disguise of the war on terror. Now, real quickly, and then I'll shut up and answer anything else you have. Bibi Netanyahu, as I stated earlier, always wanted just to go in and just mass kill all those people who wouldn't allow him to do that. We were going to fight these wars. October the 7th happened. Now you've heard people say, well, how did that happen? Did Bibi allow that to happen? Conspiracy? I don't know. But what I will tell you, I live right outside of Washington, D.C. Where I live, if some terrorists or we had an invasion by anybody, it don't take 5 or 6 hours to get from Washington, D.C. to where I live to overcome that. Why did it take so long? The most secured nation on earth, Israel, why did it take so long for their military to respond to that so-called alleged attack by Hamas? Why did it take so long? Was it allowed? Now, here's what I'll tell you. I always tell people to use your own critical thinking. That gave Bibi, like 9/11 gave us an excuse to go into war, that gave Bibi the opportunity to do what he always desired to do. And listen to this, and you and y'all just go back and check this out. Bibi is on record as saying, October 7th is now our 9/11. October 7th is now our Pearl Harbor. Now, America, you have no right to stop us from going in and tearing Hamas up and tearing Gaza up like you did in Iraq. Who are you to tell us what we can't do? Because this is our 9/11 now. This is our Pearl Harbor now. And so we're going to go in, get rid of Hamas. One last thing, and that's how it ties into now. One last thing when you talk about Hamas and Hezbollah. Well, first of all, we're the ones that say they're terrorists. They identify themselves as freedom fighters. That's why they were created. People must understand that since 1947, how do you become refugees? The Israeli Ashkenazi Jews came in from Europe to take over that land with our support and take over and push the Palestinian people out of their land they've been on for thousands of years, and they became refugees. Now, here's how I make it hit home with you and your audience. If your parents had owned some land in North Carolina or South Carolina, and all of a sudden some Ku Klux Klan will come in and say, this is our land now, it was in your family for 1,000 years, it's no longer yours. That's what the Israelis did to the Palestinian people. And as I told some of my cousins, my granddad left us a plot of land in North Carolina. If some folks came and said, we're going to take that land, what are you going to do? One of my cousins told me, Dennis, you know what I have in my kitchen? You know what I have in my bedroom? They're not coming here. I'm going to fight back. So you look at Malcolm X and you look at Martin Luther King. You had Martin Luther King going to do it peacefully. You had Malcolm X say, hey, we're going to fight at all costs. Well, that's what Hezbollah and Hamas are doing. They chose to fight. all this about this terrorism and our American. I want to tell you all this. We are complicit in that war that's taking place in Gaza now. We fund Israel. We give them the equipment. And guess what? We give them diplomatic cover in the United Nations. We are complicit. So what I tell people, we are complicit in killing innocent women and children. And here's what I'll leave you with too. 90% of our country, of our Congress, to include our black Congress people, 90% support giving Israel all these weapons. And what I will tell you and your audience, if they choose to support the innocent killing, no matter who they are and where they live, if they support the killing of innocent women and children to stay in power, to stay in office, because they're scared of some Israeli lobby going to come in, Jamal, Corey, and who stood up to the Israeli lobby, and we're going to pay money to put you out of office. If you're willing to lie and cheat and allow the innocent women, killing of innocent women and children, imagine what they think of you and me.
Is it really just the lobby, or is it ideological? And what I mean by that is, what is it? Our unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Middle East. And Joe Biden said it himself, if it wasn't there, we'd create it. Meaning we have a settler colonial state in the middle of the Middle East that allows attacks into various other countries around that region. We back them to the hilt. We give them all the money, diplomatic support, all of that stuff. So is it entirely, oh my God, we're terrified of AIPAC? Or is it, no, we're an imperialist country. We like the fact that we have, let's say, effectively whites who have taken over, white European Jews, who've taken over that area. And they are kind of like the other. And the reason I say this is, if you look at it, you're looking at about, 15% of the globe that lumps together and calls itself the West.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they create a colony in the middle of the Middle East that breaks up the continuity of the Middle East and allows attacks in that.
You're describing it so perfect. Yes.
So I guess I'm saying, is it entirely AIPAC, or is it also an ideological point of view? Joe Biden didn't do anything. Like these people, I would have to go back to Richard Nixon, where Richard Nixon would make this argument. Yeah, there are times where you have to tell Israel to stop. Or maybe Ronald Reagan, when Ronald Reagan was like, I'm shocked that I had the power to do that. Yes, you do, because you paid for all of it. So give me your take on this. You've been there.
That is a great question. And you ready for this? It is both. It is a Israeli lobby, AIPAC, and then some of its ideology. You ready for this? The reason I say some of this ideology. The Jewish people are indoctrinated too. They don't understand. Many of my friends, my sponsors, listen, what people don't understand, there are more Jewish protesters out in the streets and all these campuses than anybody. That is not broadcasted. There are more Jewish protesters. They're the ones who have not been indoctrinated or broke the indoctrination that we are God's chosen people. They are Ashkenazi Jews that converted to Judaism. They're not the original that came over. They don't have no, listen, Bibi Netanyahu grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. How is that his land? Now he's the president of that land. He grew up in Pennsylvania. You have the Palestinians that lived there for thousands of years who got pushed out. Now, when I say it's ideology too, you have some, and let me just say this, and I always tell folks, we got to be able to separate Jewish and Zionism. The ideology is Zionism, the colonialism, the belief that, hey, we can go in there and take that land and colonize it with our people from Europe, if you will. We'll allow some people to come in, Ethiopia, but we're going to keep it like second class. The Ethiopians are treated worse than we are over here. You follow me? That's a fact too. So we're going to allow some of them to come in. Zionism, the far right Jews that feel this. Now, when I say it's also ideology, then we have what you call Christian Zionists. They are the white evangelists that believe, hey, there's their land and we're going to support them. But guess what? They are indoctrinated too. The government of Israel provides free trips to ministers and pastors from the United States to indoctrinate them that, hey, we are the good people and the Palestinians are the bad people. A fact again. I talked to a couple of those ministers. One went over there open-eyed because he was saying he was warned about that. He said he was pushed to the side because he questioned what the Israelis were telling him, who invited a free paid trip. Those that they knew that they had, like, for example, the current ambassador to Israel, United States ambassador to Israel, a guy named Huckabee, is a Christian Zionist.
Lunatic.
Okay? That's the ideology as well. Now, the AIPAC portion of it, they're the ones who fund this. They fund all this, whether it be the free trips to pastors, the free trips, you ready for this, to members of Congress, which my congressperson, Steny Hoyer, who usually escorts a lot of these members of Congress, to indoctrinate them to that ideology. So there is an ideology piece of it, and then there's a funding piece of it that's done by, led by, because there's a number of Israeli lobbies, but they're led by AIPAC.
Yo, I give you another one, Cory Booker.
And I said, you heard me say Corey, right? I said Jamal, then I said Corey.
Cory Booker is on video trying to explain to a bunch of Israelis how to indoctrinate African Americans to the cause of
that's correct. I was talking about the female when they get. Yeah, listen, I shared that with some of my friends. Let me just tell you about it. Yeah, I shared that with some. Listen, I'm trying to educate us too. We are in
video. And he's
listen,
like,
it's on video. I shared that with some of my colleagues and friends to show them. But that's how it started. Listen, I talked to a number of these folks. Like I said, some of my sponsors are Jewish who are against this. They're not Zionists. So we got to separate. As I tell folks, there are good blacks, there are good whites, there are good Indians, there are good people from the Indo-Pacific. There are bad Jewish people, and there are great loving Jewish people. The Zionists, I tell people how you separate the two. The Zionists are the Ku Klux Klan of the Jewish people.
Yes.
Because as I stated earlier, which does not, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm glad you said that, because Booker was explaining to him where African Americans, because of the history of this country, would identify and empathize with the situation of Gazans. So you have to get the political leaders very early in their career.
Young.
Basically, you have to juice them with money very early to get them on your side. And it's like, okay, that's disgusting.
Let me tell you this. Listen, that's why we got to open our eyes. Let me tell you this. I am so disappointed in him. But listen, early on, until I found out, I was a fan of Akeem Jeffries. You know what? He gets more money. He's the number one. How do you think he became the leader of the Democratic Party in the Congress? Because of the fact he gets more money from AIPAC than any other members in Congress. Your audience can Google that. Bought and paid for it. That's why I said 90%. When I said Corey earlier and Jamal from New York, and Corey, I think she was from, I want to say Michigan, they got voted out because they, Bush.
Corey Booker's from New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's from Jamal is from New York, and she's from New Jersey.
Yeah, Cory Booker's from New Jersey. He's
not Corey, not Cory Booker. Yeah, he's from New Jersey. Yeah, he's bought and paid for it. I'm talking about, I think, Corey Bush, who got voted out by AIPAC. They spent all that money because she supported the Palestinian people. And that came from AIPAC money. So going back to your original question, that was a spot-on great question. It's both ideology, Christian Zionist, indoctrination. What a great example when you said Cory Booker. I shared that, and that should be shared by everybody, showing how you indoctrinate. Because I was wondering, I say, how do these folks in Congress become so, hey, I support it? Oh, let me tell you something else. You done got me started now. You're going to be saying, I'll never have Fritz on again. Last summer, hey, I tell folks, I don't like the winter. I stay hibernated in the winter like bears and so forth. But last summer, I spent a lot of time on the Hill helping doctors against genocide. These are doctors that have been over there and seen it and can't even get time with members of Congress. I went over on the Hill a number of times, walked the halls of Congress. You will not believe the number of Israeli flags standing outside of Congress and their offices. I support Israel. You know why? Because AIPAC told them to do that. I was going in to try to meet with other veterans and so forth. I was going to try to meet with members of Congress, and that they wouldn't meet with us. Veterans now of wars. But then you saw all these AIPAC people that was welcome in open arms. And the one last thing I will tell you when I tell veterans, when Bibi Netanyahu, you remember he came in and spoke to our Congress and got all the standing ovations. Some of our members didn't go. He made a comment that because there was a lot of folks out on the Capitol demonstrating his appearance before our Congress. And doing his words, he said, you got people out there that are demonstrating against my visit and so forth, and they are pawns of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. Well, guess what, Bibi Netanyahu and our Congress who stood up and gave him a standing ovation. You know who was out there protesting? Me, Dennis Fritz, who served 28 years. Larry Wilkerson, a retired Army officer and State Department official under Colin Powell. A lady by the name of Ann Wright, a colonel retired in the United States Army who was a diplomat who resigned because of the Iraq War. Many other veterans out there protesting because Bibi Netanyahu, along with our Congress and the Bush administration, got 4,500 members of our armed forces killed based on a lie on WMD on behalf of Israel. And what I tell our members of Congress, Cory Booker, Hakeem Jeffries, you are pawns of Bibi Netanyahu. That is a fact.
I have to get your take on something else, and I'll let you go. The audience is loving you to bits.
Well, I'm sorry if I got to, but this is, listen, my wife told me, sometimes, Dennis, you act angry. This is worth being angry about.
Oh, they love you. They love it. It was like, he's on fire. So that you're perfectly fine. Okay. So I am very skeptical of the peace process that Donald Trump is engaged in. I don't believe he's a peace president at all, by the way.
Which one now? So many peace states going up to Hamas?
Well, this one. So Donald Trump, who is supposedly, ostensibly, in peace negotiations with Iran, yesterday went out as he, prostrated himself for money. From
transactional. Remember I said that.
Transactional. Comes out.
I want to make a deal with Iran.
Now keep in mind,
I want to make a deal with Iran. I want to do something if it's possible. But for that to happen, it must stop sponsoring terror, halt its bloody proxy wars, and permanently and verifiably cease its pursuit of nuclear weapons. They cannot have a nuclear weapon.
So we're clear. Even by U.S. standards, Iran is not trying to get a nuclear weapon, meaning our own intelligence says.
And we've been saying that.
They're not trying to do it. All right. This is on top of him saying, cease working with terrorists, as he shakes the hand of a literal head-chopping jihadist, Jelani, that was out there murdering Americans in Syria and head one of leaders of ISIS. I just want to make that point. All right. So how on earth could Donald Trump be saying this? And doesn't this sound a lot like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Meaning, isn't this taking the same tenor? You have George Bush, who has Project for a New American Century. He decides with his other neocons, we are going to come up with a pretext to invade Iraq. Oh, I know, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We're going to pretend like there's a peace process. We're going to send Scott Ritter over there not to stop a war, but to start a war. There's that. And then, oh, the peace process blew up. Oh my God, now we have a pretext by which we can attack Iraq. Okay, Donald Trump says Iran is trying to get weapons of mass destruction. Okay, this sounds very familiar. We have a peace process. That also sounds very familiar. Donald Trump takes maximalist demands in regards to something that he knows that they're not going to do because they're a sovereign nation, and no sovereign nation. Hey, you shouldn't even be looking at Iran. Full stop, right? You're effectively threatening unilateral military action against a country that is not threatening you. So there's that. Two, you are effectively saying they're trying to get weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, just like you did. I'm sorry, in Iran, just like you did in Iraq. You come up with a peace process that is designed to fail because you're asking them for things that you know they're never going to give you. When it fails, it blows up. You've already said, well, we're going to attack you if you don't accept the deal that we're putting on the table. You're also trying to say that whatever the Answer Allah does is a one-to-one with Iran, that Iran is effectively pushing them to do it. And so you've created a context by which you can now militarily strike Iran. Now, I think that the U.S. is going to bite off more than it can chew if it does that. And if we can't deal with the Houthis, where he effectively, his pain threshold is so low that he pulls out from the Houthis, oh my God, you're running into with Iran. But it sounds like he's creating a very similar context to attack Iran using the same methodology and approach that was used to attack Iraq. What am I
Well,
missing? Or am I
let me
wrong?
just
Do you
say
think I'm wrong?
something. Your audience couldn't see me, but you saw me when you were talking, jumping up and down and said, man, you just said something so key. I had something in my book. I don't know why I let the editor take it out. You know, I'm a rookie writer or whatever. I just wanted to get this book out, a plain, simple reading. You know, I explained it so that people not familiar with foreign policy and government and military. I explained it so easily, so it's easily read, and it's a short read. And but listen, I had this in my book, and I let the editor take it out. I wish I would not have let them do that. What you just said. The reason I'm on this doggone crusade as well is to keep us from going to war with Iran. Okay? Now, what you said earlier about Iraq, WMD. Now, as I go around, when I'm talking to audiences, as I'm going to share with you, I said, people, remember this. Fool us once, shame on them, Bush administration, WMD, Iraq. Fool us again, shame on us, Iran and nuclear weapons. Iran does not want a nuclear weapon. As you mentioned earlier, that our intelligence community has said they're not making a nuclear weapon. We've been saying that all along. You know where that comes from? Direct from the mouth of Bibi Netanyahu. He's been saying that for decades. Your audience can go and Google him before our Congress 20 years ago, saying that they have a nuclear weapon. They're 4 days away. They're 5 days away. Well, I would think by 20 years now, they would have had that weapon by now if they truly wanted it. Critical thinking. I always tell our audience to think about that. If they were 20 years ago, 4 days away, 10 days away, they would have had that nuclear weapon by now. Think about that. North Korea have theirs, right? North Korea. Okay, now, going back to something else you said about this treaty. Yeah, Iran having a nuclear weapon will be an excuse to go to war, even though our intelligence community is saying they're not trying to make a nuclear weapon. That will be the rationale. But the main rationale will be, this is why Trump broke the nuclear deal. First, you got to understand something I said earlier about administrators and people coming in the agenda. Trump knew nothing about foreign policy coming in and all this. Bush didn't know anything about it. You have advisors like the neocons that come in with agendas that are advising them. Now, the reason Trump broke the nuclear treaty that we had, if I remember right, the JCPOA, the reason he broke that was because of the fact, which Iran will not do. I think Iran would try to work a deal, and I do think Trump would try to work a deal because he's transactional. He wants some more of that oil. He wants whatever. He wants to trade with them. You know, he wants them to buy our goods. So I think, you know, he's a businessman, you know. But here's the deal. The neocons, the movement, they don't want Iran to have ballistic missiles. They have ballistic missiles that can destroy Israel. That's why they don't need a nuclear weapon. So part of the deal during the Obama administration was they tried, some of the neocons, hardliners tried to say, okay, you got to get rid of those ballistic missiles. Why? Because they can carry nuclear weapons, those ballistic missiles. And not only that, they are powerful and accurate. And listen, let me just give you an example. When I say critical thinking, when we, when under the first Trump administration, when we took out Iran's one of their top leaders, Iran responded in Iraq with ballistic missiles, and they left cradles, and they understand how powerful they are. When Israel attacked Iran and they said they were going to respond, they responded with ballistic missiles. They did more damage than what was exposed, and that's a fact too. But you don't want to expose that because they know, your so-called enemy know how much it was exposed. So now, what's going to stop a deal, if it was going to be made, was that they're going to insist that Iran get rid of their ballistic missiles. And Iran is not going to do that. And I don't blame them because of the fact they're giving away their sovereignty then, because that is their final line of defense, are those ballistic missiles, which they have plenty of, and they're very powerful, and they're very accurate. Now, do I think, once again, I can give you facts, assumptions, opinions. My opinion, my assumption, do I think Trump really wants peace? Yes. You know why? Because of his ego. He wants to be the one to say, I was the one who made peace in the Middle East. That's why he keeps pushing the Abraham Accords. That's why he keeps pushing that. The last piece of that, if I'm almost there with Saudi. We already got Iraq. If I can get Iran, I will go down as history as being the man, the president that finally made peace in the Middle East. So my opinion, yes, if there can be a peace, but there's going to be such a hard push. Let me just say this. The reason they got rid of his national security advisor was because of the fact he's one of those hardliners that is bought and paid for by the Israeli lobby. Because he was back.
He was back. Mike Waltz was a spy.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. There you go. Exactly. And so hardliners like him, they don't want the peace. But yeah, do I think Trump really? Yeah, because it'll make him look good. I was the man that all these many years and decades, I was the one that brought peace to the Middle East.
But then how does that speech get made? Full of lies, by the way. In fact, Trump created an alternate reality in Saudi Arabia. In fact, every accusation was a confession. Hamas and rape. Okay, well, I can show you videos.
Remember I said, he says the quiet part out loud.
That's why he says it out loud. I guess my point is, if he wants peace, then how is he talking about a ballistic missiles programs that he knows that they're not going to give up? How is he saying that they're trying to create nuclear weapons that he knows that they're not trying to make? How is he saying that? Meaning he is postulating a false reality. And I have to wonder, okay, if you're postulating this false reality, why? I'll give you another example. When Trump was talking about Russia, for example, he said, I want peace in Ukraine. He wasn't constructing a false reality. If you notice, he started coming around to reality. Well, this is because of NATO expansion. Okay, Crimea is Russian. Yeah, I mean, this was always a red line. Okay, well, that's a reality that people weren't getting for 3 years because the Biden administration was creating a false reality in order to create a justification for an attack. Trump is doing the exact same thing dealing with Iran. So if indeed he is looking for some kind of deal, why is he putting out stuff that is so beyond the pale of negotiation? Iran is, so we can support terrorists, but Iran, quote unquote, can't. Oh, so we can have nukes. Israel can have nukes,
Iran can't?
But Iran can't. Like, I can go down this list, right? So Iran is stealing its people's money for terrorist activities, but Israel has invaded Lebanon, Syria. They're slaughtering people as we speak. As Trump, every word that was, every syllable that was coming out of Trump's mouth was an Israeli woman and child that was being murdered by the Israeli government. So if he's creating this false reality for Iran, how is that indicative of a person who's trying to get peace in Iran? It sounds like he's creating a context for war, every bit as much as George Bush with the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Let me just say this. You remember I said earlier, there's so much pressure in Washington, D.C. In my book, I talk about, and I quote President Obama at the time. I became very upset at President Obama because he was being pushed, and he quotes that, and I got his quote in my book of all the pressure he was under. Listen, let me just tell you, remember I said it crosses in both administrations, Republican and Democrats? You don't know the pressure that Obama was getting.
Real quick, though, pressure from who? I know you say lobbyists, but what is
those
leverage? What leverage?
Listen, let me say this. The only reason presidents are in office, the only reason members of Congress are in office, because people fund their campaigns.
Right.
They don't fund their campaigns for nothing. They want something out of it. That's why when you hear all this push about getting campaign finance reform and getting money out of politics, you have, when we talk about Smackley Butler, we have so much money and pressure on these members of Congress that, hey, we won't support you the next time. There are people that want to stay in office that long. And so let me just go back to this. And so the pressure. So Obama was pressured into by these forces to go in and attack Assad. Okay? And he fought. You read that in my book. He fought against it, but it was hard. He talks about that because of the fact that money. You know, if you don't support these folks, we're going to vote you out. So you got to make a decision. Well, do I want to stay in the office and be somebody, that everybody love and I'm in office or whatever? Or do I, or Do I succumb to the pressure to stay in office, or do I do what's right? Do I do what's right? Now, going back to Trump. Now, I got to be careful here what I'm about to say, because I'm not a psychiatrist. But you know how we said Biden lost all faculties at the end there. He couldn't be president again, right? You're hearing that about Trump right now, right? So you have to understand when I say this pressure, opinion, assumption, because I do think he wants peace based on what I just said. But you got people, you got to be quick on your feet. When you get older, your mind is not as sharp. You got people that's pushing talking points to him. This is what you have to say. This is what you have to come across. This dude is getting mixed up. In his heart, I do think he wants peace because it's transactional, gets up out of it. But at the same time, you have these forces I'm talking about, these lobbyists, whether it be the military, industrial. Let me tell you something. Listen, you got to understand this. War is a racket. We give Ukraine all these weapons. All you have to do is listen to Lindsey Graham. We give Israel all these weapons. They have to be replaced. Okay, when we talk, it's called foreign military sales. We give these countries all this money, but to buy weapons, but they have to buy the weapons from us.
Right.
From us. A Ponzi scheme. We're going to give it to y'all, but you give it back to us, and then our oligarchs get rich. Okay? We want war, not per se, but our government and these forces that are funding our members of Congress and these presidential administrations. And so when you say, I hear Trump talking about the ballistic missiles, I hear him talking about this and that, he's being pushed to say that with talking points. And then he gives, oh, I guess I'm supposed to say this. Oh, I guess I'm supposed to say that. Though he wants to be, then he may get back in his office and guess what happens this? Just follow this. I've been studying this. Wait a minute. Why did I say that? He's going to put out a tweet the next day over that surprises all the staff. Oh, why did he say that? Why did he do that? Because he gets back to his own world by himself, but nobody's pushing all these talking points to him. Remember, he used to say in his first term, he didn't read Intel. I don't know if you remember that, but he said he didn't read his Intel books and all that. He didn't read this and that. You know, he went out on the fly. Okay, they're putting talking points. You know, the so-called experts, you know, that, hey, this is how we run our foreign policy. He has a different ideal, so he follows those talking points. Then you talk about reality. Then he comes back to his own world, gets in his bedroom at 1 o'clock in the morning. Then he puts out a tweet, hey, I'm going to make peace with Iran. Oh, by the way, you know what I'm going to do? I may call for a Palestine state. You know, oh, no, you can't say that. You can't do that. So that's how it works. We operate in confusion. And I mean, you never know what's going to happen. We don't know the press, what's going to come out of his mouth. Once again,
inconsistent.
He
has been consistent on this. He hasn't deviated from this. On this topic, he's been very consistent. Aragachi, the foreign minister for Iran, did point out, he was like, the U.S. doesn't know what he wants. If you remember, but in the very beginning, Witkoff, when he was initially negotiating, they sounded like they were on the same page. We're going to lower the amount of nuclear enrichment. We're okay with that. No issue. Witkoff gets attacked immediately after he does that, in which case his demands maximize. You get Rubio giving statements out, effectively saying we need a Libyan option for Iran, that we need to get rid of all of they can't have nuclear enrichment in Iran. Okay, again, they're being consistent when they're putting out these messages over and over. Even Trump himself, when he's putting out his tweets saying that everything that the Houthis does is effectively Iran doing it. Okay.
Oh, well said. Again, you know, we always say Iranian-backed Houthis.
Exactly.
That's a message. Iranian-backed, that's a message. But let me just say this again. Listen, all this is politics. All this is ruthless oligarchs. You mentioned Rubio. Listen, in the book, man, I hate to keep promoting this book. It's all going to be there. In this book, I talk about these neocons, these Israeli lobbyists. They surround themselves, and part of their agenda is, and they did it with Bush. They even did it for Obama, because you have Democratic neocons too. Victoria Nuland, I don't know if you ever heard that name before, who helped the coup to take out the president-elect in Ukraine in 2014. Now, with that said, though, Rubio is bought and paid for. They were funding all his campaigns. He wants to be president. And so you ever heard, oh man, I'm trying to think of the congressman's name, that he said all these members of Congress have handlers.
Thomas Massey.
Massey.
Yep.
Have handlers. That's a fact. Okay. Rubio, even as the State Department, how do you think he got that job? The push by those handlers. He still have handlers from his country. He has to put out those messages. That's why it's so confusing. So Trump has his way. And like I said, just follow this in the future. He may come out and tweet something. All of a sudden you hear the media say, wow, where did that come from? Oh, that caught the administration, meaning the staff, by surprise too. You follow me? It's confusing. You know, this is probably, as I told folks, the first time we were on edge about Trump. I said every one of us lost 10 years of our life expectancy under the first administration. Now, it's only been not 4 months yet, and I've already lost another 10 years. Because what you just said, hey, I want peace, but he has to be the strong man too. He certain peace, he's like, well, they can't have a nuclear weapon. Well, we just said they don't want a nuclear. Your own President Trump, your own intel community told you they're not trying. But yet, what are his talking points? As you just said it, they can't have a nuclear weapon. Oh, but I want peace though. We can have, you get for which they want to do for civilian purposes. Okay, you can have a certain program. But wait, Whitecliff, wait a minute. Somebody else all of a sudden pressured him. I can't remember, but it was like a few months back. They had a negotiator for them, for the government, that said, Israel don't tell us what to do. We do it. He was gone the next day.
Yes, he was. He was the one who was negotiating with Hamas. Yeah.
He was gone the next day.
And
Israel don't tell us. Those forces I'm telling you about.
Because that message that Trump put out saying, well, they can have civilian usage, that is not inconsistent with what Rubio was saying. What they meant was, and the propaganda was, well, they could have civilian usage providing they are not enriching.
Enriching, yes.
Under Trump's thing under Rubio's thing is the Libyan model, as they call it, you have to get your nuclear supplies from somebody else, which again breaches Iran's red line of no, we are a sovereign country and we will enrich and we would agree upon the limits of enrichment.
Exactly. And you're right.
Pointing out that tweet that Trump is putting out is not inconsistent with what Rubio was saying in this kind of politicized way of trying to get across this neocon policy.
Yeah.
Again, his tweets are consistent with what he's been saying, is my point.
And let me just say this. When you said that Iran's not going to follow that, you're right. All you have to do is look at what happened in Libya. When they gave up, I think it was 2003 or 2004, when they gave up their nuclear program, there's no longer a Gaddafi.
Yep.
Now it's what he was doing for that country was great. Now it's a third world with no functioning government now. So you're right. Hey, look, I don't know what to take. Remember, I can give you a substantive fact. I don't know what's going on in Trump's mind. This is the most confusing administration ever because you never know what's going to happen. So, this is one of the things I tell you, Uncle. As I tell folks, I can give you facts of things I know.
Fair enough.
I can give you an assumption. I can give you an opinion, Uncle.
That is perfectly fair. I ask because there's a white hat and a black hat version of this story. In one sense, what you see is what you get. That no, Trump wants peace. He's there's some level of split with Netanyahu, even though he's still be close to Israel. He's working behind the scenes with Hamas. He's calling off their dogs for Yemen. Meaning there's that version, but the other version is all of this stuff is politics. And in the same way they got rid of Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Sudan is now a basket case. Iran, last man standing. And you have an administration full of neocons that is letting Netanyahu does whatever he wants. And one of the things that he wants is go after Iran. And in the same way that George Bush was running the policy, but what is something to New American Century.
Project for New American Century.
There's also Pathway to Persia, which explains pretend to have negotiations, blow up the negotiations, create a justification to attack Iran or allow Israel to attack Iran. And so when I look at it from a historical context, and I see Trump doing something similar, I have questions. Now, I
And
haven't
you
taken a
should.
side. Yeah, I haven't taken a side. I'm just saying I've been somewhat cynical on it, even though I leave the branch open for the audience to make their choice about which one it is.
Let me just say this, and you're exactly right. Trump may want peace, which I said that's my opinion and my assumption, but there are people that don't want peace that are backing Bibi Netanyahu. Some of it ideology and some of it is funding. Now, you mentioned something about the PNAC, as I mentioned before. You know, that is the home of all these folks, the PNAC and these neocons. You ever heard of the American Enterprise Institute?
Yes.
AEI, you know, a conservative think tank, okay? All of Bush's administration, his main, would being the vice president of at the time, all came from I think it was 16. That's in the book as well. 16 of his cabinet members and administrators came from the American Enterprise Institute. Yeah, that's in the book. Take a look at that.
Wow.
They all came from there. And like I said, listen, I told somebody yesterday during an interview, my job is to help educate the American public and even the world. And I appreciate you giving me that opportunity. Now it's up to you all to use your critical thinking to say, wait a minute, this is not right. Because of the fact, if we can be kept unknowingly, there's so much that's happening under our eyes. People like Larry Wilkerson and myself and others that have come out, as part of the Eisenhower Media Network, we have former national security so-called experts from the CIA, the FBI. You know, one of our members, Colleen Raleigh, she was one of the FBI folks that was, her? Yeah. She was telling them, she was telling them, hey, something's not right. You got these folks that are learning how to take off, but not learning how to land. She was an FBI whistleblower, to say, hey, warning. Those warnings were discounted, So we have then we became, hey, what is going on here? So we must do our part in sharing what we know, facts that I can give you. And then if you so ask me something I don't know, may have to say even uncle, I can give you an opinion or an assumption as well. But my job is to share with you my knowledge to educate as many folks as I can. Then it's up to you to use the critical thinking and then to think about our future folks, when we go to vote or whatever the case may be, or put pressure on our members of Congress to say, well, wait a minute, what about this? You don't know what you don't know. Yeah. So my job is to help you know.
You've been fantastic. I appreciate it.
I don't know about that, and I apologize if I got, all emotional and so. You
have been fantastic. As a flat fact, you've been awesome, and I thank you for this. Well, Dennis Fritz, retired Commander Chief Master Sergeant of the United States Air Force. He is currently director of the Eisenhower Media Network with the mission to promote peace and diplomacy over the world. Over war. While on active duty, he served as principal senior advisor to 4-star commanders at Pacific Air Force and Air Force Space Command. He also held the additional duty as senior enlisted advisor to the commander of North American Aerospace Defense Command, that's NORAD, just in case people wanted to know the acronym. He's author of the book, Deadly Betrayal, The Truth About Why the United States Invaded Iraq. You've been awesome. I really hope you come back. Thank you for this.
Well, I look forward to coming back again. Thank you for having me.
You have a good one. Be safe. All right. He was a great, great guest. You should have him every week. Great conversation. Melissa Morgan. Yeah, he's a great guest. He's a really good guest. No, he was fantastic. And in fact, he stayed with me the entire hour. And oh, Jesus Christ, he stayed with me an hour and 20 minutes. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that. All right. I didn't mean for that. Look, when we have the conversation about Iran, I am super curious about what other people think. I am super curious about it. Because what I'm hoping, I think that's what it is. I have a kernel of optimism in me that hasn't been beaten out of me. And I'm hoping I'm wrong. And I'm hoping that when I'm talking to somebody, they make it clear to me that I'm wrong on that issue. But there's no way for anybody to really prove that, right? Unless Trump himself comes with an interview and says, I'm not trying to do this. But even that, Trump lies as easily as he breathes. So I wouldn't even believe Trump if he told me it was, I could have the window open. He says sunny outside, and I would still doubt what he is telling me. He lies as easily as he breathes. So there's that. Let's go to chats. It's we're well beyond the 3-hour mark. I'm making up for pulling out early yesterday. Alexander G. Jamal is monetized. Alexander, yes, but they're going to demonetize the show. I guarantee you, the show has. I've been a hard ass on the issue of Israel today. My guests have been a hard ass on the issue of Israel today. I strongly suspect the show is going to get demonetized from jump. I'm Laugh 66. And by the way, I do the show anyway. I don't give a shit at this point. You're committing a genocide. It's outrageous, and it should be called out. Laugh 66. Laith is correct. There will be no going back after what is being done to innocent people in all of these days we are living in. And all of these days we're living in, we should be screaming, not anointing this evil with silence or despair. You're right. 1,000% right. You're 1,000% right. Laith, his anger is there. You could see it. You could see it. He's very calm. He's very measured in the way that he talks, but it's there. It comes out during the interview and during some of the commentary when he's explaining something. There's a rage that should be there in all of us. You know, when Jews make this thing of never again, it's not just Jews. When Russians are celebrating Victory Day, it shouldn't just be Russians. At the nub of it all, they're human beings. And it's not just human beings that beat back the Nazis. Yes, the bulk of it, 80% of them that were killed on the Eastern Front. But the world came together and said, this shit is unacceptable. And the world came together and held a court saying this shit is unacceptable. The entire point of Nuremberg was, this is unacceptable in human affairs. We don't allow this. This is a no. This is not something that we are okay with. Fast forward, and you get all of these European capitals and Western capitals that supposedly, ostensibly, was working in the Nuremberg trials, was against it, that now are muted. They're muted. And to make it even worse, Israel leverages the murder and the slaughter of all of those Jews at those concentration camps in order to commit the murder and the slaughter of all of these Palestinians. They're leveraging the names, the cost, the expense of all of those lives in the most horrific Holocaust in order to do this, because that's what they're doing. Couldn't get away with it if it wasn't for that. And not to mention their colony. And so we love the fact that we have a white colony in the middle of the Middle East. It's fucking outrageous. Do you think we support you? Thank you, Alexander G. I appreciate it, man. It's just outrageous today. Thanks for having this analysis. You're doing humanity service. I'm doing God's work. I'm doing Alexander G. It all depends on who talked to Trump last. He always echoed the last person he talked to. Trump is ambivalent. Well, that's the rub. He has been consistent. It's not like he's deviated in what he's been saying on the issue of Iran. He's been consistent. Auntie Ann, your streams aren't starting on Rumble anymore for about a week now. Even the replay isn't available on. Even the replay is only available on YouTube. Just letting you know. So, Auntie Ann, that is true. That is on purpose. Rumble costs money. And Rumble costs money, and I haven't built a following on Rumble. And so it's effectively money that you're paying out month after month after month after month with no return. And even when you do build up some money in Rumble, you have to build up a certain amount for the money to come back. And so it's like, okay, dude, this has been years. And you rack up the amount that you've spent on Rumble versus no return on it. I can't justify it. Just can't justify it. The number of people who are on Rumble are very few. Even the number of people who watch the live stream are very few. And so from my point of view, just come to YouTube. It's a URL. The difference is a URL. Just put the shit in the browser and come on over. Janice Anderson, that is the best description of Zionist I have heard. Yeah, he is awesome, right? He was really good. What is this? Incognegro. I don't love these names. Chief Fritz, American Israeli Education Foundation is a military-industrial complex slush fund for AIPAC Group, more so than American millionaires and billionaire class. The American Israeli Education Foundation is a military-industrial complex fund. See, as he pointed out, there were multiple slush funds for Israeli money that should be under FARA, but it's not. They should be under FARA. They have one sole purpose, and that is to support the government of Israel. Okay, to me, that's obviously a FARA violation that they don't necessarily go with. Look, the answer is probably yes, but I don't know. So I can't answer it. I think that's Martin Luther King's mugshot, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. Reborn Through Hate, super sticker. Thank you, Reborn Through Hate. That's a hell of a name. And that picture is terrifying. But thank you very much for your super chat. Super sticker. Guys, we have gone very long today. We have gone very long. And I have kept Master Sergeant. I love that name. God, I love that name. I wouldn't even want a different title of Colonel. I would just want to be called Master Sergeant. Yeah, MLK's mugshot. That's what I thought. Not everybody who has been arrested is, sometimes you're arrested because you're doing God's work. All right. All right. I'm going to call it a day. I want to thank all of you. Oh, we have one more. What? Super sticker. Thank you, What? I appreciate it. All right, guys. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. We have had a damn good show. It was a great show today. Jamal chat was good. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, today was a good show. Maybe I'll let you kick me at my acid chest someday. I really wish there were YouTubers that played. I would love to have a lefty YouTuber chess tournament or something. That would be just phenomenal. But I don't know anybody that does YouTube or that's lefty media. So there's that. All right, I'm going to end this. I'm going to say you guys have a fantastic weekend. I will see you guys on Monday. Be aware on Friday, I'm going to be leaving this property. I've been here for 2 months. So I don't know his information. There's been a lot of people who have wanted to get on that either would say no or I don't have their information. He's one of them. The other one is, oh God, what is the guy? There's this guy that Judge Knapp has on that has some of the best analysis. Chaz? Is it Chaz Friedman, I think? His analysis is phenomenal, just phenomenal. Judge Knapp have a lot of people on, but he is one of the best. I think he was like a diplomat or something like that. And he has his finger just on the pulse of things that are going on in the foreign policy sense in a way that surpasses anybody else that George Knapp has on. I've tried to get him on. He politely responded in an email, effectively saying no, but he was very polite about it. Yeah. Rachel Blevins gave you a shout out the other day. Really? Did she? Yeah, Chess Reed's my ambassador. Yeah, he's fantastic. He is phenomenal. He is phenomenal. 1,000 times over, he is phenomenal. There are very few people who I watch online where I'm like, that guy gets it. That guy gets it. Where the analysis is so sublime and so just on point. It's not hyperbolic. It's not emotionally driven. It's just very deadpan. This is what is happening around the world right now. And you listen, you're like, whoa, he's that guy. Alexander McCurse is that guy too, by the way. And the British thing makes it work even better. I mean, granted, I have to speed him up. I run him on twice the speed because he talks very slow. And as you notice, I talk very fast. So when I'm taking in information, I take in information in the way I talk. But he's another one that is very good at his explanation, even when I disagree with him, by the way. He is very good in his explanation of foreign policy. And he has this, I don't want this to sound weird, but there's a sweet core to his analysis that is heartwarming. I put it that way. Like when he says there should be investigations about an international community of coming together for investigations. And you're sitting there like, dude, you know that it's never going to happen. You know it's not going to happen, but you say it anyway, even though you know it's a flat fact. That is not necessarily going to take place. It is a heartwarming aspect of his show. He should have like a fireplace behind him with the fire going, and he's sitting there. It's just very British. But no, he's really good. Yeah, there are a few people who nail it for me when they're giving their analysis of the stuff. Chaz is really good. I would love to have him on the show. Adrian, I've seen him give analysis. I don't have his information to even try to reach out to him. So, but Rachel Blevins, give me a shout out. Well, I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. If I'm not mistaken, Rachel Blevins is also one of those award winners. I mean, I'm joining a good group of people, by the way. When I got the list where they were like, Jamal Thomas is now on the email chain of award winners for the Sharma Shim Award. And, you know, the reason why I'm shocked at it, and I don't think I'm being insecure, the Serena Shim Award. I don't think I'm being insecure when I point out, like, how the hell did I get this award? Laith Marouf got this award also, by the way. Laith Marouf. The same Laith Marouf that was on today, the same Laith Marouf that is in Lebanon that is being bombed, the same Laith Marouf that sees journalists being murdered en masse in Israel, and the same Laith Marouf that still takes his body out and follows Israeli drones in order to detail what is happening, knowing full well that his life is at stake as he does it. That same Laith Marouf. When I see his name on that list, I think to myself, how the fuck am I on that list? I don't say that, by the way, to say I'm not appreciative. I am appreciative. I work damn hard for this. My days start at 5 in the morning, go till late at night. So to appreciate it, it's just, yeah, I don't know. But I definitely appreciate being on the list, and it feels good to get acknowledgement and recognition for hard work, especially in something like this where you're kind of isolated and you're just, you know, this is what I do, right? And the thrust of your energies goes into it. Well, and chess. But it's those two things, this and chess. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say. I appreciate it. All right, I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I'm going to give a shout out to everybody in that committee that approved me of that reward. You have my radical thank you for it. Definitely. It's nice to be acknowledged. You all have a fantastic day. Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Like to say, hit the like button. Thank you for that. Like, share, subscribe. You can support this content. PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Super Stickers. Buy me a coffee now. I've added that on one of my subs. Ask for that. I think that's everything. Have a good one all. Be safe.